I'd like to call this committee of the whole to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth.
Present.
Mr. Hayes. Ms. Huth.
Here.
Ms. Pat.
Here.
Mr. Otto.
Here.
Mr. Whalen.
Here.
Ms. Wyman.
Here.
Mayor Satterthwaite.
Here.
We have a quorum. First, we'd like to hear from additions to the agenda. Do council members have any additions to the agenda? I do have a proposed change. There's a staff member who's going to have to leave early. If we could move number 8 to above number 5, so basically number 8, referring to Michelle's Bridal Shop, would be right after public input. Do council members have any concerns about that move? Okay. Are there any staff reports? Bruce, Todd? Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting. Is there a motion? Approval? Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Pat?
Thank you. There's one correction on page 5. I'm sorry, one correction on page 5. The top of the page, the first item 2, the second line, it says HACC's commitment of the word relation should be relocation.
Okay. Are there other changes, Ms. Pat?
Oh, that's it?
Council members have any concerns with those changes? Okay. All those in favor of passing the minutes of the previous meeting, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That carries. Now we have public input, and we do have quite a bit of public input this evening. For those of you who just came in, you just need to fill out one of the gold forms in the back of the room, and you are entitled to speak to the council, before the council, for up to 5 minutes. Because of the number of people that we have, we're going to ask you to limit your comments to be as brief as possible and to attempt not to repeat things that have already been said. I do have a stopwatch today, thanks to Ms. Wyman, and I'll be timing people and not intended to be rude, but if you do reach 5 minutes, we will need to cut you off. So the first person who will be speaking before the council is George Carlisle of 406 East Green Street, number 102. George?
Good evening. I'm here to tell you that we do very much need the tram system in not only Urbana but Champaign, and possibly at some point it might even Savoy. But the traffic situation in both cities has gotten a lot worse in recent years. The congestion and the various environmental impacts from all the traffic, notwithstanding millions of gallons of petroleum that are being lost forever as they're burned in all the vehicles that are congesting our streets now. And some parts of town, and in the case of Urbana, it's mostly along the Urbana campus. And from the maps that I've seen on the tram system, there would be a concentration of routes in that area, and it would be extended to Lincoln Square Mall in the east, downtown Champaign on the west, and perhaps beyond that. We really need the tram for a number of reasons. Bill Hammock, in a recent commentary of February 10th that was on WILL radio and in the paper that week and on his website, earguy.com, mentions that our present reserves of petroleum are expected to last only 20 to 40 years under the present technology of extraction. When exhausted, it will be more expensive and environmentally damaging to extract petroleum from the oil shales or tar sands of Alberta, and there are many problems involved with that. So he had conserve, conserve, conserve as the last 3 words in his statement that week. And one way to conserve, we do need the tram system. It would be electrically powered, which means that alternatives to petrol used to fuel, since most of the electricity around here is generated with coal, and that has much larger reserve potential in the nuclear plant when it's operating. And there are the possibilities of wind, solar power for generating electricity. So we do need the electrically powered tram as an alternative to our internal combustion vehicles. Plus, the tram is more flexible. using a fixed guideway, either track or magnetic guideway. You can operate more cars than is possible with a rubber-tired steerable conveyance, or what you can do with a steerable with the articulated buses that we have that hold about 75 to 80 passengers if they're really crammed. The tram can go up to 3 or 4 cars. As flexible during light traffic times, just 1 car is necessary, while during peak times you might need 3, and particularly around campus rush hour we will need the larger traffic capacity. And the tram, as many have already studied, has shown that the economic development, some of the pictures that were shown in a meeting earlier down at the Civitas showed what the tram might look like if it served Lincoln Square, and if Lincoln Square were remodeled to make a hub terminal for a lot more businesses associated with that. Should bring in a lot more business that we desperately need in Lincoln Square. And hopefully the same is true downtown Champaign and Campus A, if it goes down the South Campus, the Research Park, and all over perhaps go to the airport and other areas. But we especially need it, and we cannot afford to have the city vote it down. Even though Champaign did, we need to try to keep the idea going, and if at all possible. And we also need the funding to come not from just property tax vehicles themselves through an impact fee, either an annual sticker fee or an increase in taxes, the fuel pump, a local tax, or some form of automated toll collection pass on the tollways. Thank you.
Thank you for your input, George. Next, we'll hear from Carolyn Gust. I can't read the name very well. It's next East Urbana. Corky? There, Corky. Speaking on the tram.
I retired approximately 5 years ago after 40 years in transportation business. Managed school bus systems for 25 years. We have and we need and we have a good MT bus service system. But in my opinion, it's overkill. And I'll explain where I'm coming from. And I'm concerned about this. We're not looking at an overkill here. At one time, never did Urbana school bus, middle school, took over 8 to transport their students. When MTD started busing part of the middle school students, they have 8 buses themselves in the system now, and we got 4 school buses. In the high school system, never did they take over 4 school buses to bus the high school system. MTD pulls up every morning transportation system in the high school and the van school. And that's what I'm hoping we can avoid, overkilling perhaps too much trans system. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Next, we'll hear from Dan McKenzie of 1790 Arrow Place in Urbana about the tram.
Good evening. With all due respect to the council, you appear to be considering replacing expensive pieces of equipment, transportation equipment, with extremely, very costly pieces of transportation equipment, which leads to a high tax burden on the homeowner. This, as I understand it, we're talking about a traffic problem and a parking problem. And the U of I is the problem and the MTD is the problem, in my estimation. You need to have a moratorium on the university building north of the city reviews it here at the city, that they have enough parking and transportation to support this dense grouping of buildings and the need for this beehive that we have on the campus. I've got several solutions to that, or some additional comments, but I want you to picture in your mind, if you will, taking 4 or 5, 6 or 8 of these existing buses that we use and painting them red, blue, or yellow, and putting a 10-foot run down Wright Street, down Green to Urbana, up Springfield to Champaign. You're still going to have traffic and parking problems if you can swing the cost. You're still going to have, or you will have, a much greater tax burden on the homeowner. I mean, it aesthetically looks great. All these towns we've been hearing about that have these trams are like 5, 10, 15, 20 times the size metropolitan area that we have. The businesses, let's say the tax base that possibly can support that. I'm looking at it from a homeowner. Tax. We pay enough now. Some ideas for is that they need to have their classes start on the even hour, 8, 10, 12, through 8 o'clock at night, 5 or 6 days a week. The students can walk the class. The U of I needs to build on top of the lot west of the Assembly Hall, so they still have parking there. And they can move this administrative functions from Central Campus out there and let the students use those as classrooms that are on the campus. As far as the MTD, also picture in your mind, or you can see it, whenever you're out morning, noon, afternoon, on North Prospect, South Prospect, weekday, weekend, count the number of people you see on these large, very large buses. They're twice the size that they should be. And yes, they do transport a lot of students on the campus, around the campus. That's where the need is. So if you have the folks so they can walk to class and get the traffic away from the campus and not let them build anymore, have the traffic and parking in mind. That would be the way to go about that. I feel that the MTD has exercised poor stewardship of our tax funds. Again, we have these vehicles running around town that only have 1, 2, 6, and 8 people riding them. They can use buses that are half the size, large vans, or a combination thereof.
Mr. McKenzie, you're at 5 minutes.
I guess in parting, thanks for listening. We do more taxes or higher taxes than what we have already. We can solve it, or the U of I and the MTD should solve it, without this exceed expenditures for a tram. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Next, we'll hear from Carl Hill about representing the UBA Home Parade. He's at 1913 Trails Drive in Urbana, and this concerns an update on the Home Parade.
Just an update, yeah. We're getting together tomorrow be our second meeting for this year, but we're formulating the policies and procedures for our home parade, which advertising and that kind of thing. We have probably 5 subdivisions right now, hoping to get 2 more involved before we get started. We have the Showcase of Homes happening in Mahomet this year through the Home Builder Association. It's going to be the 2nd and 3rd weekends in June. The 4th weekend we were planning to have the home parade. It looks like we have a taste of champagne, and we may not want to conflict with that. The next weekend is 4th of July, and then after that we'll be probably looking at the 2nd weekend of July for our home parade. So we'll kind of keep you updated on that. It looks like the building permits have been going very well. The Urbana program, thank you all. It's working very well, I think, for all of us. It's kind of a win-win situation, and we want to keep those kind of programs going. I would like to throw in my 2 cents worth while I'm here, though, on the MTD situation. I've talked with a lot of people concerning it, several from the MTD, several people there who are very good people, very thoughtful people, saying that it's something that we need to study. We're getting some very good ideas here tonight, it sounds like. A lot of people have a lot of ideas on what we need to do and can do. Sometimes national opinions and ideas of what has transpired and what needs to transpire. I understand that ridership is good. We have over 10 million, 10.3 million, I think it was, riders a year. We're up with the number of riders. I guess the ridership is up with many, many large towns across the United States. And I guess thanks to campus for a lot of those. But the more I look into it, the more I see that I don't know. Went through the Hoover Dam a few years back, and while we're getting through with the tour, it's quite a tour. We asked the tour guide, if we were building this thing today, what would it cost? And he says, well, the best we can figure, it would cost about $29 million to figure out how much it would cost. And I'm not for sure that this is the Hoover Dam, but at the same time, I think we could look at a professional opinion of what it's going to take, or how it's going to affect the cities, what it's going to, and we're looking at probably 4 or 5 years down the road before we can even get this done. So starting now, before we get to a time where transportation is more difficult, it just seems like a good thing to go ahead and support the MTD at this point and see what can happen down the road and what it's really going to cost through professionals that kind of know lots of this. Thank you.
Carl, thank you for the update and your input. Next, we'll hear from Thomas Bett of 707 West Oregon, And this concerns number 11 of the city fines with various question marks. So we don't know where he stands, but go ahead, Tom.
Well, I don't know exactly how I stand, because I'm not exactly how far the council is going to go on this issue. I am Tom Betts. My name's always mispronounced, so I forgive you, and cut me off at 4 minutes. I did want to talk a little bit as a person who has worked with this issue for 19 years, both the city of Champaign and the city of Urbana to a much lesser extent in terms of fines for underage drinking. When I first started as Director of Legal Services 19 years ago, the fines in Champaign were $75. They have gone up every single year. They're now at $280 for underage drinking, underage possession. Bans have largely remained the same. What I have noticed over the years is that in the city of Champaign, students and non-students alike who are under to drink continue to get busted for alcohol offenses. Every year, in fact, it seems to me that we have more and more folks that get caught. This past week in the city of Champaign, there were 62 students arrested for offenses regarding being under the age of 21 for the unofficial St. Patrick's Day. And of course, this morning they need more in my office, and people coming into the office didn't call it a bar raid. They called it a city. And that hurts, because that's not really what the law, no one should regard the law in that fashion. And that's what I'm concerned about, is I don't want people to treat these kind of offenses as simply fundraisers. But it has got to that point, that degree of cynicism exists in the community. So I do think the city of Urbana over the years, and I've dealt with the current city attorney and predecessors, and I have tremendous respect for them, as I do in the city of Champaign. I know they do a good job in trying to. I do think the city of Urbana has done a much more cooperative job regarding underage drinking. I think there's much less tension. I think it's dealt with in a much more respectful fashion in terms of city relations on this issue. I think are much better in the city of Urbana on this issue than they are in the city of Champaign, which is not to say Champaign is disastrous, but it is to say that Urbana has done a good job in my view. One of I saw some years ago, 10 years ago, when we had the first Gulf War, and I would have students who were 20 years old, and they had drank in cans or COs into my office and asking me how to get out of the fines. And of course, there's not too many ways to get out of them. And I'd tell them, this is what you need to do. You need to pay it by mail. This is not going to go on your permanent record if you pay it and pay it on time. And 2 weeks later, I had the same time doing their power of attorney because they're being shipped to the Gulf War. In this current situation that we're in with Iraq, I have 3 students. Before they went off to Iraq, one emailed me from Baghdad. The same thing happened. They paid $280 before going off to war to pay a fine for underage drinking. They can fight in Baghdad, they can risk their lives, but if they come home and drink they have to pay $280. I know the council doesn't have power over the age status and the federal law and state law on that issue, but I want you to be aware of it because it really does affect people. These fines are in relationship to a relatively minor offense. We allow adults to do all sorts of things at the age of 18. They can sign contracts, buy property, get married with unto parents, but they cannot hefty beer. And I guess I have some problems with continuing to quasi-criminalize these type of activities. I don't think that in the city of Champaign deter the behavior, and I don't particularly think that raising the fines in the city of Urbana is going to deter the behavior. I think what it does is encourages a cynical attitude. And one of my fears is someday these people who have a cynical attitude will in fact become jurors. And they're going to be cynical regarding all sorts of aspects of the law. So as you consider raising these fines, I want you to keep some of these ideas in mind, and I certainly would be happy to work with the office regarding this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Next, we'll hear from Michael Covington of 805 South Ray Street in Urbana on the topic of the tram. Michael?
Hello. Well, first off, I would like to say that I'm in favor of the tram plan and give a few reasons why that is. For starters, I think that, well, I'm very idea of something that has the potential to possibly tie together the three, be a chance to try and unify that and make something that is attractive in the center of the city instead of constantly putting all our attention to building on the fringes. Whether that would actually happen, don't know. I think it certainly bears more study. And I'd like to remind people here that the only thing we're voting on, or you're voting on, I should say, tonight is whether or not to continue studying the plan. It's lost for quite a while yet. And so it seems to me that it would be unfortunate if we were to strangle it now before we really know what the potential is. If it turns out that it's something that won't work here, then at that time, perhaps it's time to vote it down. I know that there's probably money going into new interchanges off of the highway, and people are happy to do that. We have so much money that goes into just the roads and the upkeep of all of that. So, I mean, we're talking taxes. You know, taxes go for a whole lot of things, and personally I would not be averse to seeing some of my taxes for once put into something like this. Some final comments is I work on campus, and I can tell you that students still walk to class. They walk to class to the extent that you can barely get around. If you should happen to go to a meeting at 10 of the hour, you might as well, it's going to take a while because the sidewalks are crowded, the bike paths are crowded, the buses are stuffed to bursting. But it's not just the buses on campus. I also ride buses all over town. And although I try to avoid the North Prospect scene whenever possible, the times that I do have to go up there, I'm on the bus, and I can tell you that those buses are crowded, standing room only crowded. Not only that, I ride the 50 all the time from downtown Champaign to downtown Urbana. They come once every half an hour, which is doable, although 10 minutes would certainly be a nice boon for myself. And those buses, too, on the weekends are often packed. And a lot of those people are on the weekend passes, the paper passes that get you on for the weekend. They are not students. They're community members, and so there's definitely a demand there. Other than that, that's pretty much what I have to say. The main thing is simply that right now we're only talking about studying it, and I think that we shouldn't foreclose possibilities that we might decide that we want later. We can always say that we don't want to fund this later when we find out how much that it is. And so right now, let's just keep our mind open and study it until we know what the final figures are going to be and we get some of those expert opinions that some of the previous people have referred to.
Question.
Mr. Whalen. Michael, would you take a question?
Michael, can I ask you a question? You know how much money we've spent in studying this so far?
Quite a bit, I imagine, but I do not know the exact figures, no.
Best guess $1 million, that's what I've heard. And wonder what conclusions we've come up with that much money spent on studying. But can you tell me that the tram would connect the downtowns and the campus? Why would that be different than the buses connecting downtown? And
one reason is that if you have a fixed rail line, it won't move. Right now, you can decide to run a bus, you can decide not to run a bus. This would give a sense of commitment that this is where we will happen. And so in other places, they've seen property values along a fixed rail rise in such a way that they don't on a simple bus line. There's also a different sense of, in this country, a lot of people don't like to ride a bus, but they're more willing to ride trains. So perhaps that figures into it. But the main thing is that I've read about is if you have a fixed rail line, then it shows that there's more of a commitment there that this is the path where development would happen and it can't simply be rerouted or, oh, this year we don't want to run it or that kind of thing.
do you see an advantage to flex the rail line?
Well, the buses often, it depends on how often you want to run them. I suppose right now we're running them at once every half an hour. It would be nice if some of the more popular lines ran a little more often. As far as the flexibility of where you're going to run it, those lines haven't changed in a while, so I suppose they could continue to run them there. I mean, the other thing is we have to think several years out. I mean, it's going to take a long time before, if they were to build this thing, it would take a long time before that would happen. So we can look at what the stats are right now for ridership, but also need to think more towards the future, how many people might increase or not.
Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Al Weiss. Actually,
he wanted to say he's in favor of continued study, but he had to leave.
okay, so will the record show that Al Weiss is in support of the continued exploration of the tram? Harold Diamond of 403 Brookins in Urbana on the topic of the tram.
So, good evening, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on the MTD's proposed tram system. Let me begin by noting that I'm a longtime supporter and user of our excellent transit system, and my opposition to this project comes in large measure from the following concern, that this tram proposal, if it's put into effect, could well collapse the MTD. To date, our community has spent nearly $1 million. It's well over $500,000 was just the consultants part, okay? But we're getting near $1 million here. And this process has brought us, the process that has brought us to this stage, I regard as truly regrettable. That if inquiry, salesmanship, nearly all of this money could have been saved. Money was spent on such things as studying the merits of of different models of tram, Congress, making engineering studies. In fact, the right first step should have been asked, does a tram system make economic sense for our community? And I don't think that this question has been adequately examined, and it's the one that I wish to focus on here. The MTD's main premise for pushing this proposal is that the campus area is going to be overrun with buses, and I hold this to be a debatable premise. Moreover, if the MTD's proposals are enacted, there's a very good chance that ridership, in fact, will decrease. See why we should be skeptical of claims of overcrowded streets, of buses causing overcrowded streets. Consider the prediction in the tram study of there having some 87 buses on Wright Street in a 1-hour period. In fact, some of these buses would be going north. Others would be going south. Some up Green Street. Some only operate south of Green Street. Using the current MTD schedule, I counted the number of buses now going past the Transit Plaza, which is one of the busiest stops on Wright Street, 8 to 9 a.m. in the morning, which is one of the busiest times. There are 42 buses in 1 hour. This is the relevant figure, and it's very far from causing a huge traffic jam. On the claim of ever-increasing ridership, the consultant's report assumes a 3% annual increase in public transportation ridership in the coming years. However, the tram system would in fact be a less user-friendly system, and a less user-friendly system probably would reduce and not increase ridership. First, to cut the number of its vehicles running through campus, the MTD proposed the average waiting time there from 5 minutes to 10 minutes. Now, since most of the campus trips are in fact less than 10 minutes walk, many potential riders will simply walk. Second, the new proposal would bring fewer buses from residential areas to campus. Instead, riders from some residential areas would be dropped in downtown Urbana or downtown Champaign, from where they would have to transfer to a tram. Common sense says that with these changes, we can expect a decrease in ridership rather than the 3% increases in ridership that were claimed by the consultants. Now, such policies could lead to diverse the student enthusiasm for continuing to pay the current $33 per semester transportation fee likely would diminish. If the students opt to quit paying this fee, the loss of over $2 million annually would end the MTD as we now know it. And this would be a huge financial disaster, with our community left to bear huge capital operating costs of a minimally used transit system. How much money are we talking about? Well, based on the $178 million price tag, with the local ratepayers picking up 20% of the tab, the capital cost of the proposed system would more than double the MTD portion of our local taxes. Into the Portland, Oregon Streetcar Citizens Advisory Committee minutes, we can expect the tram operating costs to be 50% higher than the corresponding bus costs. Given all of the pressing needs of our community, to name a few, infrastructure renewal, schools, social services, keeping down our taxes, it does not appear sensible to replace an excellent transportation system with a significantly more expensive one. You are being asked to give Urbana this project and are being told that no funding is currently requested of the city. In fact, we as taxpayers have already spent too much on this project. If we were to spend $1 million, which is what the projection is for further engineering studies, this project still would not make economic sense, and I urge you not to support the MTD's tram proposal.
Thank you. Questions?
I'm sorry, what was your name?
Harold Diamond.
Diamond, thank you. And just one quickie question. The 42, is that just the southbound buses going past the bookstore, or was that both sides?
Northbound.
Oh, the north, but there is
Passing
just
the
the one way.
Transit Plaza going north.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
At least that was my count.
Yeah, sounds right. Thank you.
Mr. Whalen?
Where'd you get the figure of $1 million for the consulting study?
The consultants were paid, I think, $1,000, and there have been many other costs attached to the whole thing done. So it's getting up there toward $1 million.
Were you able to ascertain those numbers from going to the MTD?
Well, from the MTD's material, they have said it's $500,000 to the consultants alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
You know, if there's anything wrong, I'm prepared to, you know, what was the MTD people hold to be unfair. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Diamond. Next, we'll hear from Lois Steinberg of 306 West Nevada.
Hi, I just want to comment about what some people commented earlier. One man said we have a traffic problem, you know, the university being congested, and a parking problem, and I disagree. I think we have a car problem. And we have a love affair with the car, and I think it's time to break up. And I would really support a tram system. I think it's, you know, it's something that we should do sooner rather than later, and I think the environment, and it speaks on all levels, and I think, you know, I don't have any ideas about, you know, the money involved and all that, but I would be happy to pay taxes on a tram system, and I would ride it if we had one. That's all.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Paul Smith, 2205 Boudreaux, on the resolution concerning the tram.
I'm Paul Smith, and we have Smith Apartments with about 300 students on the campus. And they always ask me, why do you have to raise the rent every year? Well, we had a tax cap placed on the property taxes, but the assessor raises your assessed value, so you increase your taxes. The only way I can get that is charge more rent. Inflation goes up about 4% a year. Takes up, I raise your rent 2 to 3%, which is $5 to $10 a month per apartment each year. Since 9/11, it's gone up from $22,000 to $62,000. That's $40,000 increase. It comes out of rent. That's $11 a month per apartment increase just on my insurance. So everything goes up and up and up. They say, why do you have to have more rent? I don't know of any student who is going to vote to raise his rent 10 to 12 to have a different bus system. To me, the present bus system shuttles the students where they need to go fast enough. So I'm voting no for 300 residents to not have a different expensive bus. And the $178 million they want for the whole system, that all comes from taxes, either local taxes, state taxes, or federal taxes. Like the guy said, let's take the money away from Washington, so when they have to spend it, then they can lower your taxes. So it all comes from taxes, federal or where. So I think we have a good bus system now. So I'm voting no for the 300 people to keep the rent down.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from T. John Kim of 3801 Clubhouse Drive. Mr. Kim.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Urbana Council, glad to see you and glad to see my former student Bruce Walden sitting in the council. This statement prepared, if you can distribute that, please. I'm T. John Kim, Professor of Urban and Regional Systems, teaching transportation-related courses at the university since 1976. I would like to make a brief remark about why I'm supporting the system in the Urbana-Champaign area. I would like to bring your attention to the following statistical facts in the United States of America. Traffic congestion causes more than $100 billion a year. Traffic accident, death, more than 40 a year, injury, 3 million people a year. More than 80% of air pollution in the urbanized area is caused by automobiles. From 1970 to 1996, the mileage drive has grown 4 times as fast as the population, twice as fast as licensed drivers, and 18 times as fast as the new road construction in the United States. Your today might be that, is a transit system beneficial to the society in a small town as in Urbana-Champaign? Among many reasons I can spend a few hours to convince you, let me, since I have only 5 minutes, maybe 4 minutes now, the present generation has an obligation to provide as pleasant life support system of the earth as we inherited from our ancestors to our next generations. We have to provide sustainable transport and urban our sons and daughters and their sons and daughters. Can transportation system be sustainable? Can urban development be sustainable? Are we serious about sustainable development? Should we accept the promise that sustainable transport and urban development is not a realistic policy objective and is a transport in urban area unsustainable? Should strong actions be introduced in other sectors to achieve global CO2 targets, but transport kept exempt from this debate? Ever-increasing population and greater desires to communicate and conduct economic activity, the transportation needs of the world are consuming an extreme amount of resources. As up to rise, these resources will become increasingly scarce, and a significant cost will be placed on future generations unless the manner in which we plan and manage transportation systems is fundamentally sustainable. Transport, urban and regional development is a concept that refers to an acceptable level of social costs associated with the physical movement of people and goods. These social costs, which cause a burden to economic at large and probably seems to be now, as we heard from previous people, are related to the decay of environmental quality, transit fatality rates, and congestion. To correctly view the transportation system in an urban area for sustainability, all decisions ranging from micro-level operations to long-term planning decisions must be considered. Further, the problem of sustainable development is multi-dimensional. It involves a range of issues concerning society and nature. The citizens of the Urbana-Champaign area have a great opportunity to show the world that we laid a cornerstone toward solving the global and beginning to restore our life support system of the earth, as pleasant as we have inherited from our ancestors for our next generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Next, we'll hear from Kirsten Replogo of 715 South Broadway in Urbana concerning the resolution about the tram.
Good evening. Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity to talk to you about the proposed MTD fixed guideway between Urbana and campus, University of Illinois. And in order to maintain this world-class institution, Urbana-Champaign must compete with other communities that may have the mountains or the ocean or some other natural feature as a draw. And we compete with them not by blindly doing what every other community is doing, but by intentionally creating does things differently, that embraces innovation and vision. But I'm here tonight primarily to speak on behalf of the well over 500 members of Sierra Club who live in Urbana-Champaign. Transit-oriented development, which would be supported by and a draw for, helps create compact communities, reducing our overall ecological footprint. Protecting farmland and open space, reducing stormwater runoff and the resulting water quality problems, and reducing carbon dioxide emissions due to fewer automobile trips are just a few of the environmental benefits of well-planned communities. The tram would also run on a cleaner power source than MTD buses and reduce the number of buses traveling between these 2 points with coincident reductions in air and noise pollution. Public health studies have shown a direct link between the particulates emitted from diesel engines and increased incidences of asthma in neighborhoods surrounding these diesel corridors. At this point, City Council support for continuing to study the feasibility of the tram will cost Urbana nothing. A vibrant, livable community in terms of our local environment and public health, abandoning this project now will cost us all very, very much. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Brandon Bowersox of 802 East California Avenue concerning the tram resolution.
Good evening. Until about a year ago, I didn't own my own car, so For my whole life, since I've lived in the time I was a youth to a student to then a working professional, I had a bike and a bus pass, and that's what I counted on to get around town. Tonight I'll briefly share with you some notes that my alderperson, Ms. Huth. Dear Alderperson Huth and the Council, I encourage you to support the tram project. Saturday's News Gazette reported that Mayor Satterthwaite is concerned about the price tag, saying that it's that of any other civic project. I believe that logic is missing something. What is the cost of our city street network, or Urbana's 8 school buildings? What's the price tag of a ring road, limited access, high-speed highway that could go around Champaign-Urbana? If that's tag on any piece of city infrastructure, we would come up with an equally large number. But we build and pay for such projects over a number of years, and the cost doesn't fall solely on the city of Urbana. The same is true for a tram. Flavor the tram's other benefits, like less traffic congestion, less diesel bus exhaust, fast passenger loading and unloading, better wheelchair access or economic development, to name a few. I ask you to support further consideration of the project. I believe that if F can land this federal project in our town, it would be a great amenity. Thank you for your time.
Brandon, thank you for your input. Next, we'll hear from Amy Johansson Alnet, 5 Lincolnwood Drive. Amy?
Thank you. I have just a few reasons the City of Urbana will continue to support exploration of a fixed guideway or tram system between the downtowns and through the campus. The first reason is that it would be good for downtown Urbana business development, and I know the goal for the city. The second is that I believe it will actually increase ridership for the MTD. There's a lot of focus on how many riders we have now, but I think that with a tram, since trams are able to ride, more people will ride the tram, and that will reduce car dependency. Third reason is that the tram would be more environmentally friendly than buses, and certainly more environmentally friendly than cars. I believe that tram development will encourage denser development, which requires less infrastructure investment on the part of the City of Urbana. It will make the Twin Cities a more conference venue and day trip destination for people in the area. If we have the only tram around, people will want to come and see it. It will contribute to Urbana being a place for U of I grads to stay after graduation so that they can contribute to the tram will also save taxpayers in the urbanized area in and around Urbana-Champaign over $94 million long-term, according to QOTS. And if you're interested in that, they're having an information session Thursday from 4 to 7 at the Illinois Terminal. This is an infrastructure costs for things like streets, lighting, sewers, and sidewalks, and other areas that might be more likely to be developed rather than downtown if we did not have the tram. And finally, I think that this is a national trend that we're going to be seeing more of in the next 30, 40 years, and I would love to see Urbana and Champaign be at the forefront of this movement rather than one of the stragglers. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Next, we'll hear from David Johnson of 608 East Chalmers.
Good evening. Most of the benefits have already been mentioned, so I won't elaborate on those. One thing that just really struck me while I was sitting here, sort of what Kim said, tram systems are statistically significantly safer than bus systems, than automobiles. Sort of building off what Professor Kim said about traffic deaths, 40,000 a year in the United States. If the tram system even saved one life, what's the price tag there? I don't have any remarks, obviously, but that's just what came to mind. Otherwise, I just second everything else that's been said in favor of the tram. Thank you.
Thanks for your input. Next, we'll hear from Thomas. I'm sorry, I'm horrible with names. Thomas McTighe of 603 West Washington Street. Was not to address the committee, but please, if you've changed your mind, go ahead.
Yeah, I just basically wanted to sit up here and express that I support the tram and basically support what everyone has said in favor of it today. Just looking at the cost analysis, I do think that there will be a definite benefit in terms of infrastructural costs catering to automobiles over the next 5 to 10 years. What implementation, what kind of time period we're looking at for implementation for the tram, but I'm sure it's at least 5 years. Congestion is bound to go up. I've been here since 1998, and congestion in the university and even in Urbana near the university has astoundingly gone up, I feel. I was actually really surprised how bad it was, and cost of parking is any indication. I think it was 25 cents an hour to park here when I first came here, and now it's 75 cents at most meters, almost $1. You can park in Chicago for about that price for an hour. So considering that, and considering the fixed system where businesses, residences, high-density housing establishments in the area know that there's going to be transportation there for this and support it, and it's it'll take Urbana into the future, and I really do think that we shouldn't just be riding on the coattails of other cities that are going to be considering this in the future. Congestion is an issue. Urbana is going to grow, being a university town, so I would like you to support it.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Theodore Gray of 606 West Oregon. Same topic.
So I wanted to talk about two things. One is sort of the difference between a tram system and a bus system from my perspective, whether the price is insane. I should mention I'm one of the founders of Wolfram Research, which is currently located at the Trade Center South building in sort of southwest Champaign. Last summer we were approached by Peter Fox, who was wondering if we might want to move our offices to the Burnham site, which I thought was a great idea, but everybody else at the company thought that was kind of silly. Why would we move? What makes that site particularly different where we are now? And it's a huge undertaking to move a company with that many employees. If there were a tram running along that site, that would make a big difference. It's not sort of an abstract question. The difference from our perspective, whether it's next to the tram or not next to the tram, or whether there's a tram at all. If we could invite potential applicants to come and we walk out our front door and there's a tram there that takes us to a nice restaurant in a nice downtown area, that makes a huge difference. That's not a minor factor in whether this is a person who might come to work for us or not. Especially since we'd be the only little town like this anywhere, that we had. So I think the sense in which a tram system defines an area and encourages people to move their businesses to it is very real, very significant factor. Another example, let's say they build the big conference center down at the research park that they're talking about with the ice rink and all that stuff. We have a real problem trying to bring our conferences. We host conferences and things. We have trouble in Champaign-Urbana because there aren't conference facilities that are big enough. So we have them in Chicago, or really like to have them here. If there was a tram connecting that conference center with our offices, we could really make use of that. That would be a major factor. We would mention that to people thinking about attending the conference. You can't tell somebody like that they can between their hotel and the conference floor. That doesn't go. But a tram, it's a completely different thing. Maybe it's purely psychological, maybe it's not, but it's really very different. Also thinking about somebody, thinking about coming to a conference like that, if you tell them, you'll be here on a Saturday and take the tram to the farmer's market in Urbana, that's a big thing. I mean, that's, like I say, a bus is not the same thing. And the inflexibility of it is what makes it such a powerful force. And the fact that it's a tram and not a bus, which has these sort of somewhat difficult to define but very real psychological benefits. So the remaining question is whether the price is insane. And it certainly sounds like an awful lot of money. And it's sort of disappointing to see the sort of public debate focus on this headline figure, $178 million. Wow, well, who could possibly imagine spending that much money? But, how do you, if you compare that as per person, of which 80% will be paid for by federal grants that are going to go to somebody anyway for this sort of purpose. It's either it's South or it's Kalamazoo or whatever. Somebody's going to get that money. We're talking about $200 per person to build, what I think would be an absolutely fantastic addition to the system. And of course, that's not in 1 year. That's spread out over, many years with bonds or whatever. It doesn't strike me as an insane amount of money. It's a lot of money, but it's not some kind of pie-in-the-sky thing that we can't possibly afford. And I think, combining that with what I see as the real benefits of it, well, obviously I'm in favor of it. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Next, we'll hear from John Paul Schmidt of 908 South Cottage Grove Avenue in Urbana. Same topic.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here representing the local Green Party as well. And like many people, we've been debating the pluses and minuses of the tram system. And, things in favor, as many people have mentioned, is the benefits to environment and local public health, the benefits for city planning and the increased property values for people who happen to be located along the tram line. But like most people, we're worried about what are the costs in local taxes, both for either building the tram or for not building the tram and doing something else which might not get as much federal support. And we're also worried about whether or not it will be equitable in the sense that by installing this tram, all of our community will get improvements in their mass transit service. That means buses can be reallocated or whatnot. And it's very difficult to balance these competing concerns. Luckily, you don't have to do that tonight. Essentially, the vote before you is whether or not to pursue with a study which will be funded by federal tax dollars. And for good, federal government has already decided to spend your tax dollars on these studies. The only real question is, does it get spent in Urbana or does it get spent somewhere else? Given the clear need for improvements in our mass transit system, I can't think of any argument why we should say, oh no, spend the money elsewhere.
William Benton, representing his spouse Ruth Benton and himself, I assume, 2709 South Myra Ridge. Is William Benton present? He does not choose to address the committee, but he asked that his position be entered as opposition. That is to the MTD tram resolution. Daniel Lourdes of 310 North Busey Avenue does not choose to address the committee, but asks that his position be entered as in support of the resolution for the tram. George K. Francis of 801 South Anderson. George, are you present? Like to speak in support of the tram study.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to lighten things up a bit. I think everything that's serious and ponderous has been mentioned. Perhaps not. But I would like to start by saying that when I was a kid, very small, the first thing I ever wanted to be was a streetcar conductor. I don't think I'll ever see the day, but perhaps I can ride one again. I would like to refute some of the statements made against the study by my esteemed colleague, Professor Diamond, and another by Mr. Whelan. The empty buses issue. When I ride them, they're not empty, but perhaps they are empty. But let us not forget the empty stores. They could be used for something better. What about the empty churches? They're only occupied on Sundays and holidays. What about the empty streets out in the suburbs? They'd be used for long-term parking. What about the empty cars? Perhaps the University District, which is the most heavily impacted by the present situation, could have an HOV district. Only cars with 3 riders are allowed into the University District. So let me end with just a brief mention of something that hasn't been said too much. I'm a bicycle rider, so I'm not in favor of the traffic flow. But when I'm stuck behind a bus, and it stinks, I think that a tram that can carry more people more quickly, make fewer stops, which would be good for the waistline of some of our heavier students and citizens, and a cleaner environment would be a much better traffic flow than what we have now. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Bettina Francis of 801 South Anderson Street. She does not choose to address the committee, but asks that her position be entered as in support of the tram resolution. Miller of 107 West Washington Street also does not choose to address the committee, but is in support of the fixed guideway system. Zach, would you like to speak before the committee?
I just want to say one brief thing. I've been thinking that most of the arguments in favor of the tram system would be made, and there's one thing that I've just been missing. I agree with everything everybody else has said. Is a concern to a lot of people is that this tram system focuses on campus. It focuses on connecting the downtowns and the campus town. And some people say, well, what's in it for the folks who aren't involved in the campus system, who don't work on campus, who aren't students? And I think it's important to remember that taking resources, the most resource-intensive system is the campus area, and that by easing the burden on the campus area, it frees up transportation resources for the rest of the town. So investment that we make in improving this high-intensity corridor makes more buses available for the outskirts of town to do more trips. I very much look forward to the chance to have 10-minute service between the downtowns, and I look forward to the chance to bring more from campus to the downtowns. When I was a student, it was very difficult to get to downtown Urbana for anything that was going on that I wanted to do, and so I stuck around on campus. And I think that we might see a benefit to our local businesses if we students to get into Urbana. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have David Sidney of 1616 North Melrose Park. He does not choose to address the committee, but is in support of the tram resolution. Mr. Sidney?
Thank you. I'm a student of urban and regional planning at the University of Illinois. I am in favor of the tram because you have to think not just beyond, you have to think about beyond today. You have to think about your economic impact. A student like myself, as I make my decision as to where I want to relocate, I'm looking for a community that is not like Chicago in terms of density, but has the amenities of like Chicago. And a community of Urbana-Champaign, which I've come to love, to expand its transit system is a plus. And I'm sure there are thousands of other students just like me who make that decision. Again, you're asking, your vote is to continue the study process. I have my opinions whether or not we can reroute our bus routes. I think we can. I think we could possibly have a tram system, but we cannot shut the doors on opportunities. Please take that in consideration and please vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Genevieve Boric of 807 California. Does not choose to address the committee, but is in some resolution. And next we'll hear from Emily Talon of 408 Nevada Street. Emily?
I'm excited about the project. This is your opportunity to be positive and proactive and visionary and enlightened and really put Urbana on the map versus being status quo, resistant to change, reactionary, and non-visionary. I urge you to think about the tram as a way of investing in our community, our existing community. It's really a matter of priorities, as many other people have said. Yes, a tram is expensive, but so are roads, so is sprawl, so development, so are big boxes that locate on the outskirts of town and then end up being abandoned. All of those things are costs to the community, so you really need to factor all of those things in when considering a tram. As you know, a way of implementing what planners call smart growth, and many smart growth principles are what the City of Urbana adheres to as a matter of public policy in your comprehensive plan, in your comprehensive plan update. I actually read through a lot of those goals on your website, so are consistent with what the tram is supposed to be about. Mixed use, infill, transit-oriented development, channeling growth to established infrastructure and existing resources. That's one of the most important things you can possibly do for good urban planning. It's just a very positive thing to have a tram. It will attract development to a transportation corridor, which is exactly what smart growth is about. I think that's a real, one thing I want to say is that this will require the city of Urbana to think differently about density and about intensification along that corridor, and I think that's a really important thing for Urbana to think about. You need to have density to create walk if you do it right. It also, density supports housing choice and affordability. That's a really important goal, and you have that as a goal in your housing plan, whatever it is, your strategic downtown housing plan talks all about increasing housing opportunities in the downtown area, increasing affordable housing. The tram is consistent with those ideals, with those goals. I'll just say one last thing, and that is that I really reject the notion that somehow supporting the tram is a liberal versus conservative fiscal issue. I happen to come across a report, which I think is an excellent report, and I'd like to leave it with you. It's called 12 Anti-Transit Myths, a Conservative Critique. And it's just full of a wealth of information from a fiscally conservative Republican, of all things, supporting transit, supporting systems like the tram. So I really don't think we should get conservative. I don't think that is really what this boils down to. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Town. Next, we'll hear from Denny Hubert, I believe, is it Denise? Denny Hubert from 710 West Oregon, speaking on both the fines and the tram resolution.
I'm here because we talked about just staying home and just kind of letting it go, but then we said no. You know, I hear all these people pro and against, and I'm kind of in the middle myself on some of the issues, but I want to talk first about the tram one. The tram thing, it does come down to the mean green to me. They're talking about affordable housing in Urbana, and I just don't see that that's going to continue to happen, continue to go up in every way, and I don't care what it is. It doesn't matter what the taxable article is, they've gone up. Our sales taxes have gone up. We own a retail business in Urbana, they've gone up. Our hotel motel tax has gone up. Our real estate taxes have gone up. Every tax in Urbana has gone up. It does come down to the mean green. $178 million is preposterous whenever you consider per mile for what that tram system is going to be. And is it going to run in front of the Burnham property? I don't think so. And if the University of Illinois wants to come in and chip in that money as opposed to raising our taxes, let them at it. If the students are really in favor of green, leave those cars at their homes, not in Champaign-Urbana. Jump on those transit systems. Get on those buses, get on those trains, and leave your cars at home. You'd alleviate a lot of problems in Champaign-Urbana if the students did that. That's all I want to say particularly about that, except for this is not a solution to that problem. And there are empty buses, and Bruce Walden was here, Joe Whalen was here, Mr. Hayes was here, Esther was here. Whenever we had a temporary tram system that came in, somebody voiced today on the Woona neighborhood that they thought that was a successful thing, and obviously it wasn't. It was a big poop. It was a mess. It wasn't successful. They didn't bring it in. Everybody knows that thing was a mess. And if you've lived here, I mean, I'm not a student that's been here 40 years. I've been here since 1971. And that tram thing was a mess. It was ridiculous. It was overpriced, as this thing is too. If it's going to travel all over town, if it is going to go out to the new skating on South Neal Street, yeah, I think your chances of being successful with the tram are way better than this little bitty route that it's proposed to plan for $178 million. But $178 million is preposterous. No taxes are going to go down nuts. And I just can't see, unless the U of I is going to chip in, and unless the students are really going to think green, and I mean dollars, and leaving their vehicles elsewhere, and really easing up the traffic problems in this community, then that's a possibility. And when it comes to the fines regarding drinking and all the others, I'm in favor. I don't care if they do them 10 times. We live in a student area, and I've voiced my opinion about this to people. I am sick and tired as of incidences like Saturday night. If these students want to be, that's fine. Let them be more responsible. I don't care if they eat. I am sick and tired. I got called away to an emergency. I was supposed to go out to my car. I stepped to get in my car door and stepped in human poop. because the students behind us in the 700 block of West California who are in a duplex had huge parties. They continue to have huge parties. They drink. They're all underage. They're not at the bars. Saturday night, there were 200 students jammed in a duplex in the 700 block of West California. These were called at 12:20 p.m. They woke me up, and I was sleeping in a three density thick brick home with my windows closed on the far southwest side of my house. And they woke me up at 12:30. And as far as I'm concerned, find them, find them, find them, and pay for the tram system with that.
Next, we'll hear from David Monk about the tram resolution.
There are some broader connotations for Champaign, mainly because we were taking out railroads, and Amtrak didn't look too healthy, and it didn't look like a prime symbol for Champaign. But let me assure you, things are changing. Less grain is going down the canal, the river, Mississippi. More is going on to trains, elevators. The engines come in and load the train in 15 hours and go, instead of having sidings where you do little push back and forward things with a go-kart. Rerouting is occurring. The grain that comes from Anderson is going out by Monticello now and down to Wabash. We have right alongside us unit car trains that are huge coming through from Canada. We have intermodal trains, and we're not tapping into that sort of thing. So when you think big, think about the fast track between Chicago and St. Louis. Think about teaching aids to that. Tram is a mere teaching aid to thinking broader about what we do with railroads. If you were to put a hub in Champaign and capture some of the traffic that is coming through here on unit car trains at the moment, you would make money, I'm sure, and you would load those trains. The ones that you pick up here should be loaded with dumpy trucks that will be deliverable to an urban setting instead of deliverable and gumming up the works. I think we should remember that we have infrastructures. If we don't discombobulate them and lose them, we have infrastructures between Indianapolis and north-south at the same time. And if we were to put in a hub, then we would be, I think, in good shape. Now, that means that these trams, especially trams that are on the same 5'4½", can go out onto those lines and do recreational things when there's not a peak hour. Some of the freight that comes to downtown can be on those lines after midnight. Other countries do this sort of thing. I think that you should put this small element of railroading into context and think how it will work with Amtrak, with airport, with freight, a whole bunch of other things. It's not just one simple issue. And thank you. And good to see you back.
That wraps up the little sheets I have in front of me. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? I had a couple of blank ones, but I went through. But please come speak before the committee. And if you could state your name and address.
Right. I'm Ann Ehrlich. I live at 303 Yankee Ridge Lane, just south of Meadowbrook. I thank you for the opportunity to speak. My goal of Urbana is to see Urbana as a healthy, family-friendly, delightful, and special place to live, work, and shop. Some of this is already true, but it is under constant assault. It's, I think, some help. I call this help elements of cool. Housing. The really cool housing is, for the most part, south. These streets, sidewalk gardens, mature trees, old brick streets with moss in springtime, spacious porches, and hardwood floors of considerable age and beauty are not found in every Silicon Valley. They should be preserved. Their destruction for the purpose of replacement by apartments should be halted. Their conversion to student housing should be halted. And over time, the present should be reversed. No matter how cool the housing is, the schools must also have the elements of cool which innovators and researchology want for their children. Whenever I listen to folks buying houses, they talk about schools. Urbana will help the schools most, I think, by the tax base within District Number 116. Another element of cool is a vibrant core, not only with nightlife, but with daytime. The newly expanded library step to further the cool element of downtown. The restaurants do a good job also. Meadowbrook Park is excellent, and the dog park in size is major cool. Last year on a summer's evening, there were opening exhibits at 2 art galleries in the same block in downtown. People were going to both, then standing on the sidewalk, discussing what they had seen. It was definitely special and cool. A city which can offer Cranard, Farmers Market, Meadowbrook, a magnificently expanded library, and a large dog park have cool elements in place. In my vision of downtown Urbana, the current hotel retail complex would be rethought extensively. Is that quality was removed through the shaving of costs over time and lack of maintenance. In 1967, as a visitor to Urbana, I was taken to Lincoln Square to be impressed. I was. The whale, the horse, and the bear spread down the steps into the mall. And the fish tanks were glorious and kept in first-class condition. All are gone, and with them all the cool. A possible new life for this complex would be a premium urban dwelling community, with perhaps a high-rise tower. The view over Urbana's trees, just from the top deck of Carl's parking garage, is awesome. Why I'm here tonight specifically. A fixed guideway terminus could be inside a redeveloped Lincoln Square. Ah, you say, show me the money. Answer, it's in your fringe development, which I might add need not be limited to retail. It could be what you have wanted for a clean technology. Living and school characteristics are what make people want to live in a particular place. If there is a job there, they're on their way. A fixed guideway with a large amount of cool. Who among us has ignored fixed rail in other cities when we visit? We always take the kids. We usually take it when visiting because it's cheap, direct, fun, and cool. Urbana benefit by bringing Champaign and campus residents to a more laid-back, specialty-oriented, and spacious shopping environment. The routes are only notes on napkins today, which are willing to pony up for further study. I would like to see the Urbana hotels connected to the research park, assembly hall, possible ice rink, and other contemplated developments edge of campus, possibly through hotel vans to Lincoln Square, and then down and around. Very nice. Our research park visitors would love and appreciate the Guideway experience. Can you see them going home to New York and say, hey, look what I did in Champaign-Urbana? For those who are short-sighted and say, we can't afford it now, we don't need it now, very true. But we also do not have to either commit or pay for it now. Naysayers realize they do need it and do want it. It will still take 20 years to put it together. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Satterthwaite.
Ma'am, would you entertain a question?
Ms. Ehrlich, would you, the mayor, have...
Just curious, you know, how an individual helps to promote the cool things that you talk about in the downtown and mentioning, and yet you choose to live outside the city limits.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question.
I'm trying to put the two of those together. And
the reason Yankee Ridge should not be annexed by the city is because, one, it's robbing Peter to pay Paul. It takes money from the township, right? We would no longer pay our township taxes, we'd be paying city taxes, right? Secondly, that section is already developed. Therefore, it is, well, in the first place, it's changing the rules in the middle of the game. But in the second place, where you belong is on the undeveloped land, so that you can harvest new stuff. I mean, you can build it up. That's what you should be doing. And thirdly, wait a minute, it's coming back. Oh, yeah. On a personal note, lousy service, because we're on the way to nowhere. You're not going to send a snow truck down to shovel out Yankee Ridge, because it's way beyond anything else. So therefore, on a personal level, on a justice level, and I believe on a fair level between the municipalities, it's a no.
I understand the arguments against annexing Yankee Ridge to Urbana, but you talk about all the benefits of living in an urban area, which I agree with, but I'm wondering why you advocate for those on one hand, yet when you have a personal choice to make about where you live, you choose to live in what is a suburb of Urbana.
When we went, we spent 27 years in, and we bought our house in Champaign because in 1968, I think it was 67, Will carried a program on the Urbana City Council voting to make Urbana, you all remember this, right, war-free. It was against the Vietnam War. And I said, my God, no way am I going to live in there. We lived in Schenectady, which was an industrial town, a city manager town, etc. So I said, we're going to live in Champaign. So we lived in Champaign for 27, redeveloped until they developed their Southwest and the traffic on Prospect, and they turned Hessel Park into a destination park. It all got kind of thick. So we needed more land because I wanted to grow ornamental grasses. I wanted to have a big garden. And I wanted certain kinds of layout in house, and we looked, and we looked, and we looked. We looked for 3 years. And finally we looked, in fact, I'd already decided that we weren't going to live in Yankee Ridge because, well, at one time I said to my husband, why do people live in Yankee Ridge? It's so far we wanted. And it turned out to be very successful. And when I tell you that we have, on the front of our house, we have suburban life, you know, and we have bus service. We are in an MTD, so we do pay taxes in MTD. And in the back, we have 21 deer on the cornfield. I mean, who wouldn't live there if they were interested in those things? So if we were starting over again, if, for example, there was a really high-quality residential community, and I'm thinking of something, I remember the Vendome Hotel in Boston did this. They gutted a humongous hotel, you know, about 4 times as big as Jumer's, and they turned the whole center into an aerial core, an atrium, and they had these really wonderful apartments, all, you know, duplexes and all kinds of things. They had plants in the middle. You know, I could see living there, but at the moment, right now, I want to grow grasses, I want to see deer.
Thank you. Have we left anyone else out? Is there anyone else who'd like to speak before the committee this evening who has not yet spoken? Okay. We thank you for your input. It's always good to have lively, healthy debate. Next, ordinance number 2004-03-025. That's an ordinance approving a development agreement with Michelle's Bridal Shop.
You just begin?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, this is regarding a development agreement with Michelle's Bridal Shop. They approached the city. They purchased land on the northeast corner of Anthony Road and Willow Road, which is just better meet the requirements and provide them with a more original presence, with greater highway visibility and more space, because currently they don't have enough space at their current building. They rent out some space at Lincoln Square on a seasonal basis, and it's better for them to be able to consolidate and in order to in the new site. So we discussed different ways that the city would be able to accommodate them at their request, and If approved, the agreement would require the city to extend the sewer from a sanitary sewer interceptor about 300 feet to the north along Willow Road right-of-way. It'd be an 8-inch sanitary sewer. And also, the city, because the project is located in TIF District Number 4, and it's also located in the enterprise zone, there are certain incentives that they would be eligible for, including the TIF Redevelopment Incentive Program, which is a loan subsidy up to $60,000, and also if a project meets certain criteria, which this would, they would be eligible for a 10% grant component in addition to that loan. And also, because the project would lie both in an enterprise zone and the tax income and finance district up there, they wouldn't be eligible for property tax abatements from the city and county portion of their taxes through the enterprise zone. However, the city would offer that from other funds in lieu of the enterprise zone abatement. In return, Michelle's Bridal would dedicate a little over 4,000 square feet of their property for right-of-way, for future right-of-way improvements, and intersection improvements on the intersection of Willow and Anthony. And also, we feel that the project, because it will generate additional property tax revenue and sales tax revenue, is also in keeping with the North Cunningham Avenue redevelopment plan, which encourages additional retail uses in the area north of Interstate 74. So, so staff recommends approval, and if there's any questions regarding the development agreement, I'll be happy to answer those.
Questions? We'll go down the line. Ms. Pat?
Thank you. Just one about the enterprise zone tax break. Since if they can't get that, from the city or the county, because it's in the
right. When there's a TIF district and enterprise zone overlap, you can't utilize the enterprise zone to get the the property tax abatement benefit.
Okay, so the city is agreeing now. Is the city pay both the counties and the city's portion? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
It would basically be, they would be getting the same amount that they would have received if they had just been located in the enterprise zone.
Right, but the county's not participating in the payment part. We're doing both.
If you look in the map over here, it should be, there's an exhibit.
You point on this map, and I'll pass it down to you because I don't.
Okay. This is where the O'Brien Auto Park is. This is, and it would be this lot right here.
Okay.
It's a 1 acre tract right on the corner.
Any other questions from council members, from committee members? I have a few questions. One is, do we have a estimate of the sales tax increase that we anticipate? And that's tied with a related question, which is the new building will be 9,000 square feet, I believe. What's the size of Michelle's currently?
It's currently about 3,500 to 4,000 square feet.
Okay,
so
that's
more than double in size.
Okay, and so do we have an estimate of sales tax increase there?
It's hard to say what the increase in the sales tax would be, but I'd estimate the property tax increase to be, their total property taxes would probably be about $20,000 more.
Okay.
So the city portion would be approximately a little less than a quarter of that, so about $4,000 to $5,000 a year.
Okay. Where did the 5-year number come from for?
The 5 years is what is offered through the property tax abatement through the enterprise zone program. It's 5 years for commercial and 10 years for industrial.
Okay. And then I know there's been interest in Vine Street as a development by businesses. Do we know if there's anything, what would be the vacated Michelle's Bridal Shop space?
Well, we're encouraging them to look for a suitable retail type reuse at that site. It makes perfect sense at that corner, and as we come across potential leads or businesses that are looking to locate in the downtown area will certainly, offer that as a possibility if it meets their parking and space requirements.
Okay. Those are all my questions. Committee members, any other questions for staff? If not, the chair would entertain a motion. Ms. Pat?
I move to send the ordinance to City Council with recommendation for approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, will the clerk, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And that passes. Thank you. Next, we're now on number 5 of our original agenda. That's a resolution number 2004, a resolution in support of the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District's continued exploration of the benefits of a fixed guideway or tram system for the community. And I believe what we'll do is hear a short presentation from Mr. Costello. Mr. Costello? Okay. If you could give us a
It will be brief.
brief presentation, and then committee members feel free to
Start the stopwatch.
drill them with questions afterwards. No, you don't get a stopwatch.
Before I begin, I would like to introduce Dr. H. George Friedman, who's with us.
No, you don't get a stopwatch.
Before I begin, I would like to introduce the chair of our board, Dr. H. George Friedman, who's with us this evening as well, which leads me, I think, probably to one of the first things that I ought to be letting you know, and that is that our board has made it very clear that we have a responsibility to discuss this issue thoroughly with all of the governing boards that we're going to be dealing with. I think it should be obvious that this has not been an easy task. It has been easy discussing it. The results have not always been as easy as we would have liked. This has been a long journey even to get to this far. And I think that I would like to say thank you to the mayor and to the council for their forbearance in terms of allowing us to spend time with them and going through this process and explaining what this particular project is. This is not, I think, an easy process, and certainly not one that is easily understood, not to deride those who tend to disagree with me. But certainly it takes time to go through all the kinds of things, the ramifications that this particular project involves. One of the things, I guess, that I don't know if the project itself started out on the wrong foot or not, but I get a sense that from the moment people arrived after looking at it, that ridicule began. What on earth are they looking at something like that for? Being what the issues are and where we would be in 5, 10, 15, and 20 years, that it begins to make sense as to why we're studying it. I've been with the MPD for 30 years, and we feel a very strong sense of reputation for our organization in terms of doing the kinds of things for our community that we think we ought to do. We also get a sense that a very strong relationship, again, with our other governing bodies, certainly at the staff level, and oftentimes with the policymakers in terms of saying that we don't want to be going off by our own and simply making decisions on our own without their assistance and without their guidance. We're certainly sensitive, and I think that's been made very clear by many folks on this council, and certainly on the Champaign Council. There's extreme sensitivity to the tax issue and where's the money coming from, and I think that's rightfully so. I don't think that that should be underestimated in anything. On the other hand, as we are a tax capped, just as taxpayers will come to you and say, why are you spending my money? Our board has the same issues that face them. So I guess I would offer early on an extreme sensitivity to tax issues on the part of our board. And certainly as a taxpayer myself and a resident of, are sensitive to tax issues as well. So I think that we need to kind of clear the air there in terms of, even in terms of folks throughout the Twin Cities, and indicating that it's not as though there is not an extreme to be sprinkled with pixie dust and something that's going to appear. On the other hand, we do have relatively strong feelings that this is worth further study, and if we, in the course of that study, we can create a creative financing plan that people can live with, then I think that that's something that's worth looking at. We think the stakes are too high not to continue looking at this. It would be easy, quite frankly, at this point, to walk away. And what I mean by that is that it would be a lot less aggravation for the MTD staff and certainly for the MTD board to walk away and leave the community with the problem. That would be the easy thing to do. I don't think it would be the right thing to do. And I don't think that that would be the direction that we would go. Just real quickly, one of the things I just wanted to mention is that one thing about our organization is that we have been very strong on innovation for a long time. We were one of the first to bring in a student transportation program in the country, and ours is modeled in several cities throughout the United States. We were one of the first systems to bring in low-floor buses so people could easily access public transportation. We were the second system in the United States to have wheelchair lifts on all of our buses so people in wheelchairs could access public transportation and be mobile in our community. We were one of the early ones to bring bike racks on when we built a parking deck in 1985. We continue to work in that direction as we look at our bus waiting area on the courthouse side in cooperation with redevelopment of downtown. Those are the kinds of things that we do. But we don't do it without study, and we don't do it without measured risk. We're not going into this willy-nilly to say, okay, let's just see if we can do this. It is a rigorous process. We think we have a responsibility to look at it, and we certainly would hope that we can get some encouragement to our board that says this is what you ought to be doing. If at the end of the day it can't be done, then I think we all have to walk away, and I think that's something that people need to realize.
Start with a couple general questions and repeating some of the questions that people have called me with over the last week or two. First is, what would be a proposed tram route? Some people say Green Street, others say Springfield Avenue.
Some might even say Elm Street.
Okay.
But we're not there. We're not there. There is not a route. Right now there are musings. That would be part of the study, which one would be more economical to build. And quite frankly, as we travel on your streets, which would be your local share in some cases, I think that would have to discuss with city staff and recommendations to the council in terms of what would be most effective. That's not, that's not a decision that can be made. Now, you want to go down the street, we don't care what you say, even though it's not capable of handling that traffic. So that would have to be done in concert with staff and with council to see where we're going to go with that. So, I mean, it's quite frankly, it's fun to muse, but we're not there.
Okay. Given the fact that the city of Champaign voted no or didn't vote, or however you characterize Urbana to vote, and what's the effect of whether we vote on it, we don't vote on it, we postpone a vote?
Well, I think first of all, it's important. Certainly, we have been given our marching orders from our board that we have a responsibility to the other government agencies that we are to present this project to the agencies for their comment. I don't think there's any question about that. Second of all, we need to realize, again, that it's your streets that we're running on. The days of way back when where we had franchise agreements and private companies have long since passed. So this would be again, bordering on intergovernmental agreements and cooperation, because that's where we're going to be. Thirdly, I think it's important that we have participation in policymakers in both cities in terms of what their constituents are thinking and what we ought to be doing. We think that we ought to be studying this, and but how far we go with this, I think once again is something that we have to go with you folks. For one thing, our board could go off all by itself and do whatever it chose to do. I don't think that's the direction that anybody on our board would want to be going. I think they want this to be a consultative process throughout.
So the fact that the city of Champaign voted no.
Well, they voted that in a study session, a straw vote.
Comes up, and I think with the strong environmental base that Urbana-Champaign has, is that a tram seems to be more effective or more supportive of more intensity in the central and the core district. And I'm wondering if in the materials that you've studied, or if you've already looked at or plan to, if you haven't looked at it yet, plan to look at it, an effect that higher taxes, like a higher property tax, whether it would be for, I wouldn't support, or an MTD tax, if that has an effect of pushing more people to live on the outskirts, that is outside of the district, and then if that then has the disparate effect on concentrating people who want to live in the core.
Looked at that, and part of the reason we haven't looked at it is because we really haven't established what our funding mechanism is going to be. And I want to caution you that because there's no answers, people have chosen to construe the answers in whichever way will suit them. So I don't have an answer that means taxes must go up. Now, typical taxpayer, I guess I could say, oh, well, there's no question, but it will. I don't think that's the case, and I'm comfortable saying that. I don't know as that's the case, and I certainly I don't have an answer to that, but I don't have a place that I've come up with either. So I mean that's that's why I want to just caution you that as soon as we begin saying, well, it has to do this, it has to do that, the answer to that is it doesn't have to do any of those things because we don't know yet.
So the figures that Mr. Volk said when he met with, I think, each of us individually of the local share, that
would assume as things are right now. Okay, nothing changes, okay? There's no change in federal funding formulas. There's no change in, funding formula officially is 80-20, just like it is for highways 90-10. Okay, that's the official formula. Now, if I was to come to you and say that the federal formula is 80-20, that it's 80% federal and 20% local, which is picked up by 100% of this is going to be paid by somebody else, I would not be being truthful to you. And so we're not going to do that. Okay, but if that policy were to change, and I mean, what's going to happen in 5 years? I don't know. The reason why we think we need to continue to look at how we're going to put this together.
So maybe one other question, then I'll yield the floor.
Oh, let me quickly add, I'm not saying my boss was wrong for the minutes. I just wanted to say that things can change. Did you get that, Phyllis? Thank you.
I understand that. So am I understanding correct that the resolution isn't necessary for federal funding or to go to the next step?
It certainly is helpful to encourage to look favorably upon our application for authorization. Yes, it would be very helpful.
Okay, but it's not like a statutory requirement?
It's not a statutory requirement, but when you go to the administration and they say, the city's on board with this, you certainly would like to have them on board.
I see.
And at this point, 1 out of 2 would be just fine.
Thank you. I'll yield the floor for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Mr. Whalen.
Joe, it's good to see you.
Thank you, Senator, and it's good to see you. I'm glad that you're alive.
Well, I was saying, the tram has certain cure.
Sort of useless, but compared to bus travel. But in any case, I have a question, and that was meant as a dig. I'm just kidding you. You're a great guy, Tom, and I appreciate having worked with you, and you were on the council here, and I appreciate your efforts for the MTD, yours and Mr. Volk's. But I have a question about the $300 million figure. What happened to that? And now it's 178. How did that?
Well, that was a number that was thrown out at the plane touched down, and WDWS decided that, okay, what is this going to cost? We had no idea what it was going to cost, so we gave people the highest number we could possibly think of, so no one would have sticker shock. I think 178 million sticker shock, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. But we gave people a number based on the highest number that we've seen anybody do this. After further study, and that's exactly what we've done in this initial phase, it looks to me like it'll be something a little bit closer to 178. If we continue to study and construction techniques progress and we can reduce the cost of that, then our intention would be, can we get it less expensive? There's no greater words that can be spoken by a bureaucrat than on time and under budget. And that would be something that if we could lower the cost, we certainly would like to.
I guess, you're talking about studying more and that you didn't have an answer from Ms. Wyman about the people moving out of town, that possible impact. We've spent, what now, between $500 and $1 million in...
Well, that was Mr. Diamond's number. I don't think that was ours, but, we can be as creative as we like. $100,000 to hire a consultant.
Okay. And what did your consultant tell you, so far?
The consultant has said that if we keep the system as it is doomed to 15 years.
Okay, that's all. That's.
And they have recommended that we continue looking at 2 possible options to avoid that failure. One of which is fixed rail, and others which is called flexible transit, which is fixed rail without the rail, fixed guideway system.
You dropped off that information at my house about alternate transit systems. One of the alternatives that I haven't heard anybody discuss as of yet is smaller buses. Transit, large articulated buses, but nobody's mentioned smaller buses where there are perhaps less ridership.
So we're already doing that. As a matter of fact, out in your ward, we're already doing that. On weekends at night, we have demand responsive service that people can call so that we can avoid running buses in neighborhoods where we don't need to. We're doing that out in northeast northeast Urbana, southwest northwest Champaign. We're already doing that at some times of the day. On the other hand, the argument that I see empty buses, we carry more passengers than all of the transit systems in downstate combined. Now, one of two things has happened. Either people are riding or we're making up the numbers. And I can tell you we're not making up the numbers. Okay? But what we find ourselves is, indeed, there are buses that are empty. And some people would say, you know, we're going the wrong way half work. So that bus heading out there, probably not going to have a lot of folks on it. No question about that. And, you know, and I wouldn't argue that point. But when that bus comes in, when we have 40 to 60 people who tell those other 40 they need to wait another half an hour, I mean, the whole idea of what we're trying to do is that we design our buses just the way you design streets and we design sewers so that we can deal primarily with the maximum time in a meaningful way where we don't overbuild and we don't underbuild. But we've already begun looking at alternate ways to provide mobility and provide services in areas where we don't have to if we can avoid it.
Well, I appreciate that. And I also appreciate, I'll give you something in your behalf, to your credit. When you have a metropolitan bus system, if you're going to have a true metropolitan area, a metropolitan bus system is a must, or a metropolitan transit system. And so consequently, having one that has been run as well as ours, I think is much to our credit as a city and a community. And I mean that. But I do see an awful lot of empty buses, Tom. And a lot of people comment to me on this. They say, you know, there's one person, two people on a bus. I'm sure you're paying attention to that. And I know what you mean. People have to send the buses out and then bring them back in fuller as they progress along the route. But I see an awful lot of empty buses at rush hours and peak hours. I'm sure you're working on that. Well, I'm just curious to know, and I don't mean any of this to be embarrassing to you. I'm just meaning to give you some food for thought. You can discuss this stuff with Mr. Volk, and I'm sure you have to some degree. But if this $500,000 that was spent, according to your figures, on consultants, the question in my mind is, what answers do we have that we, as simple as the one that Ms. Wyman asked, we can't answer. The cost, the potential cost, we really, you have a guesstimate, $178,000. But there are a lot of unknowns, and I don't know, the $500,000 is a lot of money. So just give that some thought.
Well, Joe, I don't think there's any question that $500,000 is a lot of money. I don't think anybody's going to argue that point. The fact, however, is that, again, we had a responsibility to study the kinds of things that were facing us, the kinds of issues that are facing us. These are the kinds of things that the federal requires us if we're going to proceed in any way to try to solve the kinds of problems that we see in the future. I mean, I think we have to do what we have to do. No argument that that's a lot of money. I think we have got some answers that we didn't have before and quite moved in that direction.
Okay. Well, thanks, Tom.
Other questions from committee members? Mr. Hayes.
Quite often when we're dealing with serious issues, the windows or opportunities, avails itself, and quite often people don't take advantage of it. Now, I'm going to make a couple of these. Mr. Betts was here earlier. He talked about it's a shame that servicemen under 21 could give their lives for their country, but they can't buy a drink. Even though I'm against that kind of a policy, since I'm an ex-serviceman myself, some of that you blame on the 18-year-olds, because about 30 years ago it was put on a ballot, and they did not vote. And so consequently, they raised the drinking age up to 21. When we look at the national debt, dollars in debt, fighting a war and spending money on other kinds of issues, one of the ways they talk about solving the problem is to take away some of the benefit and put the most into the system. In other words, instead of letting people retire at 65, if you were born after 1908, it's right now 67. So there's a possibility they might move it up to age 70 and at the same time reduce the benefits. Well, there's a window of opportunity here because most of the baby boomers are going to be affected. Yeah, I don't hear too many of them saying anything. They're just going to go along with the program. And so, I'm not saying we need the tram, but what I would like to say is that here we have a window of opportunity to have further research done on the project to determine whether or not it's going to be feasible. But it's kind of difficult to commit the city to certain kinds of funds when we don't have the other 3 locals at this time on board. So if there's a possibility that if it's not going to create a problem for the city and have them be responsible for certain of the sums after the study is being made, then I might have a tendency to vote for it. That's all.
Well, I think Jim's point is well taken, and I said I can't say enough that I think we have. I think the message is loud and clear about the city sensitivity. I don't know how else to respond. We understand that. I think we understand that fully. What we're asking you to do is to give us some support in saying we want this continued further. I thought that this isn't a liberal or conservative issue. This is not, mostly this is where do we want the future of our community to go issue. And I think that's really what we're looking at. And is it worth us spending the time, money, and effort to see if we can solve what we know will be a problem at some point in the future by doing this? And I think that's.
Any members? That's good.
Well, I have a motion unless there are other questions from committee members.
Other questions from committee members? Ms. Huth, you have the floor.
On our desk tonight, there was a resolution of some benefits of a fixed guideway or tram system for the community. And without reading all of the whereases, I will read the part that begins now, therefore, be it resolved, so that we understand exactly the language that's being voted on, because it's a strikeout that's actually just moving of text and one addition of text in here. So after the whereas's end, we get to now, therefore be it resolved that we, the members of the City Council of the City of Urbana, support the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District's selection of locally preferred alternatives and efforts to apply for federal funding for continued study of engineering, design, and information gathering, as well as the costs and benefits of a fixed guideway system in our community. Be it further resolved that we as a council are undecided at this point about the size of the support we can reasonably offer as a city. We encourage the MTD and the committee to investigate every possible financing option to ensure project costs will not create an undue financial burden on our community and to maximize partnerships between local government agencies, the University of Illinois, and other potential local and private partners. So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Ms. Huth, would you like to speak to
Speak to the motion. I'm not going to go on and on at length. We heard the public at a pretty astounding rate in favor of the tram, and they touched on almost every argument I could possibly think of after 2 years of studying this. to come up with. 2 years ago, I sat down with the MTD and began to look at this issue. And I have to admit that when I was assigned to this committee, I came with a lot of skepticism about the project we were talking about. And even today, 2 years later, I still have a lot of questions, a lot of the questions that I'm hearing from the public. But education can be a really powerful tool, and I've spent a lot of time reading through materials, visiting other communities here and abroad, and basically just trying to figure out exactly what it is and what we're studying here. I have boxes of information at home that I've gone through, and I think that that this is something that could work for our community, but I think that there are still a lot of questions, and I'd like to see them answered. The last 6 to 8 months, I've had the opportunity to sit down with a lot of key players in our community. Later on the agenda tonight, you're going to see a campaign to build downtown Urbana that the council on, and it's given me the opportunity to talk to a lot of key players in our community, developers, investors, all sorts of folks. And one of the things that struck me was the amount of support that's coming from the business community, investor community, the developer community for this project. Really excited about the potential that this can bring to our city and no doubt to Champaign as well. And that fits nicely with what I've been reading about the economic growth benefits that tram systems have brought to other communities around the country. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've talked in the projects. They've made projects like this create a very diverse tax base for their community, and they've just revitalized some areas that had no development in them already, some that needed just a shot in the arm. And so I look at this with an eye towards having a project that just might be able to be self-financed for the local portion, more and more with some of the other systems that have helped to make this happen in their communities. They haven't had to raise local property taxes. They've allowed new growth that the system has brought to their community to allow itself. And I think that with that in mind, that we need to go on and continue to study this to see if that's a financing system that can work here as well. I want to point out one other thing, and that is the broad support that is forming behind this very project. The University of Illinois was a letter from the University of Illinois supporting the project, the further study of the project. You also heard from a developer, Carl Hill. Take note of the letter of support from the Chamber of Commerce and all of the businesses listed under there. The League of Women Voters, as you heard from the Sierra Club tonight. You also heard from at least one business owner tonight, and I've heard from many others. The Urbana Business Association, another developer. I'm looking at a stack of letters of support. The folks at Lincoln Square Mall, OGC Technologies, Tapman's, the Regional Planning Commission. We had some pretty powerful information come across our desks today from the Regional Planning Commission. The list goes on, and I think that you're going to see this continue as people learn more and more about this. I got a number of emails even today, people who had gone to the Mass Transit District website and looked at a lot of the numbers. They looked at what the Mass Transit District was planning, readily admitted to being converted. They were skeptics. They didn't support the project. They looked at the information, and they now support further study. And I would hope that council members here would keep an open mind and allow us to answer the questions that the public no doubt has for this project. So I urge you to support this resolution.
Other committee members, discussion on the motion.
I have to take just exactly the opposite point of view. As much as I compliment Tom and Mr. Volk on their efforts and their management of the transit system, I think the first question we have to ask ourselves is necessary. And we can suppose and guess at the future needs. But of course, if you look at the history of the growth in this town of the university and the population otherwise, it doesn't substantiate that kind of estimated growth, I'm afraid to say. The question that also looms in my mind is the flexibility of these systems. They say, this route, why we'll have development, and that's a guess. That's a guesstimate. No one knows that. And supposedly, if this consultant has suggested that, I'd like to see the figures on that and a clarification of it. I'm not satisfied that is going to happen. If that could happen with the tram, then why not? And the buses are flexible, whereas the tram isn't. There was a comment made tonight earlier that, well, the tram will connect the downtowns of Champaign to the campus. Buses can do that. Why not the buses? The buses are flexible. They are, there's one thing, as I said earlier, I don't see a variety of buses. You say, Tom, well, you have these smaller buses available now, and I guess we have one like downtown on Lincoln, on, where is it, Illinois Street, by the park with one or two people in them. And whatever you say, I see this in the rush hour, I see it in the morning, I see it in the evening, and I just don't see the need for this kind of investment. 178 million, as the latest guess, is to me much too much to be spending on something like this when it's not absolutely necessary. The word excited is often misused and overused. Why, we are excited about this, and developers and investors, I don't hear a lot of them as being excited. I can read to these letters that Ms. Huth has, but I don't see a lot of excitement. As a matter of fact, the crowd that was here tonight largely was supportive of this program. And then you got to ask these folks, are you going to pay the bill? Are you going to come up with the bread? The people that I talk to a person, to an absolute person in Champaign and Urbana, and I travel all around in my work, all around Champaign and Urbana, I think it's absolutely, I don't want to say absurd, because that suggests that is...
You wouldn't be the first to suggest that, though.
Well, I don't think it's absurd. I think it's a sincere effort to try to anticipate a problem and satisfy that guest need. But I don't think the conclusion is sufficient and substantial enough to warrant this kind of investment. And I don't think that spending any more money on consultants or on research is going to prove that. If the university is so much in support of it, and it's mostly going to benefit the university on Bright Street and up and down there, let them put the dollars up, the money. If the MTD is so ideal, let the MTD then put up the money. I mean, gee, of course that's our tax money.
Joe, we're not asking you for any money. That's the point.
No, that's not true, Tom. This is like one of those things, if you remember, so they'd say, well, you're not really going to decide tonight on spending any money, but what you're going to decide on is let's keep the door open and let's keep studying it and let's keep looking at it. Of course, by the time you get down the end of that tunnel, bingo, the door's closed behind you and you got to spend the money. That's the way it happens. Staff leads you by the nose, frequently that way.
Well, I would suggest at this point that we would still need to study whether we're going to ask anybody for any money, and if you don't have any money, then it isn't going to do me any good to ask you any. I mean, that's the point. I mean, if you're unwilling to give it, then it's not there.
Well,
but I understand that leading by the nose thing. I mean, that's...
Well, you know that. You know that does happen. And the staff doesn't mean to mislead us, but they want to get into it further to come up with the conclusions that they think they'll arrive at, one way or the other. And so with the MTD, I can't say enough in compliment to the MTD, and I mean that sincerely. But I must say that I can't say enough in favor of the taxpayers of this city, the people that I talk to who say no more taxes, no more expenditures like this. It's unnecessary. They don't see the need. We don't have the population growth. We don't have the flexibility we have with buses. They say no. And I will voice that opinion and represent them by saying tonight to the folks here and to the council, no, let's not do this. Let's not put our name on the line behind this.
I saw a hand. Ms. Wyman.
Yeah, I just, it's important to reiterate that at every point, because I think it's an issue that if we were to vote on, do we want to, if I were voting tonight whether to allocate property taxes, whether it's part of the current property taxes or to raise property taxes for the city of Urbana to help pay for this proposed funding, I don't think I could do that. I think that in looking at this, the MTD should explore, as this resolution suggests, all different types of funding, but I think that as Mr. Costello has said, that the MTD can't, or is under tax caps and so can't raise all that money, there is one way, of course, out of that, and that is to have a referendum to be able to raise the taxes. That's what the school districts have done or can do. That's what other taxing districts who are under tax caps can do, and that's something, obviously, a reason why any taxing district can ask the city council, city of Urbana, or city of Champaign that aren't under tax caps to be able to just allocate money, because we don't have that sort of tax cap ceiling. But I still don't think that that would be the fair way or the right way to fund this tram if it comes to fruition. The city of Urbana, unlike the city of Champaign, can't just add 1 cent of sales tax to raise $28 million for whatever project we want. And because we've got different reliance on our sales tax and property taxes, I think it wouldn't be right to put together, so perhaps only about 2.5 miles worth of area for the city of Urbana and for the residents, and to ask that we use all of the city's funds or property taxes from all of the city to do that sometime in the future is not something that I would support. I do think that it's important to look at the various, the effects. Some people talked about this being sprawl and being the tram program, tram system being anti-sprawl. I do think it's important to look at the various effects that that the tram or the cost of the tram could have, and whether that and what those effects could be. And I think that when people are looking also at support issues, people say that a tram would help bring more people to Champaign-Urbana and help keep them. And I don't doubt their sincerity. I don't doubt that that's true for many people. I think there are different things that we should also keep in mind as we're looking into the future, and when at some point in the future we are asked to fund the tram if it comes to fruition, and that is what our other what the city also supports. What I like when I look at a city, when I look at Urbana, is the recycling program, dedication to funding housing for the homeless or for very low-income families. People look at what the funding for the schools are and how good the schools are, the things that also bring people to the community. And so I think that as we look into the future, we're also going to need to look at are there not just the benefits that a tram could and will bring, but also the costs and how we weigh those. I plan to vote for this resolution, but I simply wish to caution that my vote, and I think a lot of people's support, is contingent on what the expected cost or what the cost will end up being. And if there is a cost that is too high or is it calls for a funding mechanism that I think relies too much on the city of Urbana rather than an MTD tax that taxes the entire district, I think that what could be a successful tram project.
Was that a pun?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to double check. May I make just a brief comment? We have the chairman of our board here. I think he hears you. Okay, and I think that you, all of that point is very well taken. I think it would be very difficult. How could I argue that we need to put in a tram and we have people who, how can I argue that we put in a tram and we in some way imperil our education system? I couldn't make that argument. I couldn't make that argument in conscience. But if I can do this in such a way as that it funds for the city and it helps that, then I've accomplished something that does both things. We put in that, and we're able to have more funds available as a result of development to aid our schools and to aid the kind of housing issues that we have. So if we're able to do that, then we all win. But certainly there's cost add for that, and we realize where you're at in terms of your ability to pay. I don't think there's any question about that.
And it's clear that that support of this resolution, if this passes, in no way implies a future amount of
included what you added last time. I mean, the university is every bit as tentative as you are. I think. I mean, they're very much in support of the continued study, but they have the same financial concerns that you do, and we understand that.
Thank you.
Mr. Otto.
Actually, I have a question, and I'm not sure who can answer this. I know we have some staff members in the room. Is CUAT's money that can be used as part of the on this project, or since that's coming from the federal government, is that not eligible to be part of that local match? Does anybody have any clue on that?
Bill?
Sorry. Left field, but I just thought of it, so that's why.
The CUAT's money that we've seen historically has been for highway projects, and it's not for transit-related projects. So the CUAT's, we receive $800 and some odd thousand a year is specifically targeted for highway projects.
Okay.
Now, we haven't seen a new reauthorization yet, but there will be a transit component to it, which is dedicated for transit and a balance for highways and bike paths and things of that sort.
The future CUAT's is going to have a component for bikeways and transit and things like that? Or you're just saying that new transportation bill will have a component for bikeways and transit and things like that?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, as far as everything I've read, yes.
But we don't know when we're going to see the transportation bill, that's for sure.
That's correct.
Sure.
The early betting is not till after the presidential election, so.
Why does that not surprise me? All right. Well, I'll go ahead and follow on with a couple of comments. One, I'd like to thank Councilwoman Chenoweth for pulling together this resolution. I think she did a good job of pulling both the hopes and concerns that a number of members of City Council have, including myself. And the cost question is just, it's a huge question. I think it's something that is, having made our concerns clear, I'm willing to go forward in good faith and confidence that, you understand we're going to take a look at what comes out of the other end of this project and make a decision. Is this, cost going to provide enough benefits to justify what we're being asked to contribute? And even do changes need to be made in whatever is proposed at the end to make it something that we can afford? Having said that, there's been a lot of focus on who will pay the bill. And, if there's one thing that the last 25 years have shown in America and in urban planning is that we will pay the bill. And whether we spend the money on highway projects or on transit projects, you look at cities like LA and Atlanta and DC that failed to look at the future, the clearly foreseeable problems, and come up with a plan to address that problems. They're a huge bill in terms of frustration, reduced quality of life, reduced time with their families, because eminently sensible and foreseeable decisions weren't made to address problems that were predicted. And so I think that's something that, as we have this discussion, and one number that was thrown out was that, and it was attributed to CUAT's, I'm not quite sure where it came from, but something on the order of $90 million could potentially be saved if the tram were put in place in future expenditures. Well, I don't know if that's a valid number or not, but if you're looking at a local match of $34 million to save $90 million, a dividend and returned in savings
and freeing up money to go and invest in housing and recycling and some of the other priorities that we want to make in this community. I don't think anyone does. We don't really know if 178 million is a real number, but the only way to get there and to start putting some meat on these bones is to go forward with the study. And since MTD is proposing to pay for it out of its own budget, I'm reluctant to pull the plug and say, I am quite passionate about keeping our tax burden in check and making sure that taxpayers get the maximum bang for their buck. And I think Joe Whalen shares that passion with me on that, as do a lot of other people who spoke here tonight and people who aren't here tonight who have called and talked to me about it. And it's something that we all share. But the analogy that came to mind, and it's an analogy that was fraught with problems, but it's one that I can't really leave, is in Woody Allen's Bullets Over Broadway. John Cusack had a friend, and every time, they would get passionate about something, she'd put her hands over his mouth and say, "Don't speak, don't speak, don't speak." And the look on his face pretty much said it all. He was highly pleased that she was feeling so passionate, but he was frustrated to be told, "Don't speak." And it sort of seems like that's the way that we're going down if we decide not to go ahead and look at the next phase. We're being told potential cost savings. Don't look at these problems. Don't look at any of those issues. Just don't speak. In the name of values that I agree with, which is trying to keep the tax burden in check and making sure to make the most bang for their buck. Well, we're not going to know which route is the best way to do that unless forward and collect more information. So I hope that you'll do that, and in the future we can sit down and have a discussion about some of the things that the studies will bring about. And at that point, hopefully we'll be in a position to make a decision about how do taxpayers get the most bang for their buck, and what's the best way to keep tax burdens for this community. And so tonight I think you made a very effective presentation.
Ms. Pat.
Thank you. $90 million figure is totally bogus, and false or exaggerated claims like that are exactly the reason that some in our community feel so strongly against this project. I think that there are a lot of good reasons on a cleaner power source. That would be a clear benefit of the tram. Better wheelchair access, that's something that I would support very much. People have been talking about what buses being empty, buses being full. I work on campus in the Urbana Union, and I ride the bus. The buses are really, really packed solid in the center of campus. They have those, they articulated buses, which are like a double bus, and those are full at certain hours of the day when school's in session. There are lots and lots of people who do ride the bus in the center of town, and that's why the Mass Transit District wants to do something about this. We think that they're not crazy to say we're looking at the future. We have a problem with how to move along in this densely populated space on this. There are very few things in life easier to do than get from downtown Champaign to campus, or from downtown Urbana to campus, or from campus to either of the two downtowns. And the people are talking about how we're going to revolutionize life in Champaign-Urbana when we make it possible to get from campus to downtown. I just wonder, I don't know what, do you really just not ride the bus? Or when people tell me they can't figure it out, because people would rather drive their cars and just aren't looking. But in case anyone doesn't know, there are 12 buses an hour during the day between downtown Champaign and campus, and there are 8 buses an hour during the day from downtown Urbana to campus. You can do it. The fact that there's so many people riding the buses is why MTD wants to have a better system than 12 different buses every hour, and that makes sense too. But until such time as there is some better system, folks should just know it's really, really easy to ride the bus between the campuses and or the campus and the downtowns. I've heard from a lot of people in the last 2 weeks since Champaign voted down the resolution or straw opposed. By the end of today, it was about a little over 24 people opposed, and I've heard from 10 people who were in support of this resolution. Emily Taylor's definitely right. This is not a conservative liberal issue. Virtually everyone I heard from opposed are Democrats. They include the township assessor, a former mayor, 2 former city council members, those council members being people who actually do ride the bus, and a variety of people, a lot of folks that you all know. It's interesting that all the people who asked me to vote yes on the resolution say, let's not talk about the money. This isn't about the money. We just have to go ahead with it. And I don't know how we can possibly look at all this without looking at the money. And I know there's a lot of things we don't know how much it'll cost. We're not sure what Urbana would be asked for, but I know what I was asked last year and this year, and that was for the city of Urbana to borrow somewhere between $7 and $10 million and to pay off the debt either by raising property tax or something else. That was what MTD asked me. That's why I feel so strongly about this, because that's out of the question. I was prepared to vote for this resolution tonight if it included the city of Urbana will not pay the majority of the local match, and that the mass transit district, that our support is contingent on the mass transit district taking responsibility for the local match. I won't waste everyone's time by making a motion to amend, because I know the votes aren't here to pass it. But I think that that's something that does need to be established right now up front, that the district needs to take responsibility for raising the local match in whatever way they can, other than asking the Champaign and Urbana municipal governments to pay for it out of our treasury. Earlier tonight, Professor Diamond made a number of excellent points that I think really, actually just listening to him speak tonight, it sounded like almost every phone conversation I've had with someone asking me to vote against. We are not Portland, Oregon. We do not have a population of 500,000. We are not in a metropolitan area of 1.95 million people. We are not talking about a tram system for the entire community. One of the proposals for how we could pay for the money that's been suggested is that we can take it out of our capital improvement plan. That's more frightening to me than property tax increase, because capital improvement plan it's not a slush fund that we can just dip into. That's the money we pay for all the projects that we need to do and that people expect to maintain, excuse me, the streets, the sidewalks, the street traffic lights. The tram is not going to save a huge amount of money, and that's where that $90 million figure comes from. Let's take all the money we spend on roads, and this was the pitch that Bill made to us, Bill Volk, when he spoke to us. Look at all the money you spend on roads. We won't have to spend all that money on roads if we have a tram. How many roads is the tram going on? I mean, if we've got 650 streets, I don't know if that's the exact right amount, but 650 streets in Urbana, and the tram's going to go on 3. Are you all ready to is this what the Urbana City Council wants to do? Is like, if we could get enough people living downtown, we'll just, no more residential subdivisions, we don't want to do any growth. Take that High Cross Road corridor study from us. If we had no growth, if we just built everything up in the middle of the city, and maybe if we were Atlanta or DC or one of those other places, this might be relevant, but we're Champaign-Urbana with 103,000 people, and we're not talking about the tram for the whole city. Another thing people were saying is that we're going to reduce all this car. If in fact a large number of people are driving cars from downtown to campus, and they would actually ride a tram instead, but for whatever reason they won't get on the bus, we'll reduce that car traffic. And I think there would be some reduction of it, but we're not enabling, the tram, as discussed, is not going to enable thousands of University of Illinois faculty and staff to commute to work by public transportation instead of driving, because the tram's not going to any of their homes. The tram is about getting people around campus, and as is being discussed, between campus and downtown, which is not that is something that has merit in and of itself, but let's not try to sell it to people as though it's something more than it is. And the same thing with economic development. And I'm just about done here, but this is just guessing. People say, well, but the tram will stimulate economic development, and that will bring in all this tax revenue. We won't have to raise taxes. The tram's not going out to Marketplace and to Parkland College and to North Prospect and to North Cunningham and out to the port and down to Sunnycrest. No one's even proposing that. We're talking about just from campus to downtown. So presumably, if we had a tram, that would increase development downtown. But how much? The figure the bill gave me would have come out if we paid off a $9 million loan over a 12-year period annually for 12 years. To raise $750,000 in sales tax revenue out of downtown, we would need to double the number of businesses in downtown. I mean, think about that. Do you really think a tram is going to get us 32 more stores, 7 more bars, 4 more restaurants, and 2 more supermarkets? No. And there's no reason to imply it would. Or folks say, well, if you have a tram, we could get a building like the Volition building in downtown. That if we had a tram, that it would get us something like that. But to raise $750,000 share of property tax, that would take 12 buildings the size of the Volition building in downtown. Now, I know folks say they found developers. Are there really 12 developers who each want to build a $15 million building in our downtown if we'll just run 1 mile of track from the Illini Union to Lincoln Square? I don't think so. There's a big question here about how this is going to be paid for, and the people who are, people are opposed for lots of different people who don't like the technology, and some people who are concerned about overhead. Frankly, I don't like the idea of overhead wires, and I mentioned before that if this happens, by the time it happens, there's better technology. There are some folks who don't support mass transit, but most of the people I've heard from are people who support mass transit, are willing to pay higher taxes, but the bottom line is this. They see us saying that a tram is the #1 financial for our community. It takes precedence over the schools, over housing, over health care, over all other needs. And I don't think people support that. I think most people do not think the tram should be #1. They look at a price tag of almost $200 million, and they don't see how we can swing it without putting this before our other communities' needs. I don't think a tram is a higher priority than all of our other communities' needs, certainly not more than, for example, education. And I think we need to really stop and, even the MTD should stop studying this, but we need to assess what is it that we are really expecting as a realistic outcome of this. People are concerned that $500,000 is spent studying something that may not really happen. I think before more community effort goes into pursuing this, we really need a better understanding of how, if this were to come about, a project of this tremendous size would be paid for. And if it just is something this community cannot afford, we should not be pursuing it. Thank you.
Can I just make one quick comment? So there's no misunderstanding. I don't think there's anybody at the MPD that thinks this project comes ahead of any of those things that you mentioned. I mean, I'd like to make that really clear. Everybody else comes after that. I think that, if we consistently say you can only have one or the other, then at some point choices have to be made. That's part of what the study will tell us. Can we afford all these things or not? But the battle cry of, and not necessarily you in particular, but the battle cry of people who are opposed to this has been, well, look at all the other things. This is one component of the kinds of things that we need to bring to our community. So you're absolutely right. I mean, there's no way. I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to say that we need a tram more than we need to make sure that we don't lose 3 teachers at the high school. I don't think you're going to hear that from us.
Frankly, I think you, Dr. Friedman, your job is to make this a top priority. That's what the mass transit district's responsibility is. The only reason you exist is to services and levy the taxes to do that. What concerns members of the public is, and they see that we are being asked to make a huge financial commitment, and to sign on to, this isn't just hype and rah-rah, but that the reason, MTD can study this, we could vote this up or down today, MTD is still going to go ahead and do whatever they're going to do. The whole reason that MTD is coming to us is for the financial buy-in, and I realize we're not making any commitment of that tonight, but that's what people are concerned about, that that if we're going to take $750,000 out of our budget and give it to another taxing district, yeah, most of the people I know say give it to the schools first. And we're not giving it to the schools either because we don't have an extra $750,000 or even an extra, $50,000 to just give to some other taxing district, and this is without any merit, but there are a lot of other priorities with which this has to compete, and that the price tag is what makes it. Because it costs so much, there's no way to do it unless we make it a higher priority than all other things, and that's why a lot of people think it just can't be done.
Are you finished?
Yes.
I'd like to weigh in on the issue. I did help it. I want to explain a little bit why. I think the word today is opportunity. 33,000 rides a day. We have, but the possibility of $142 million from the federal government. I keep not hearing is the opportunity to bring federal funds to our community. We have a reputable bus system, and I know who've been involved with the MTD for, what did you say, 20 or 30 years?
In May, it'll be 30 years.
30 years, and the kinds of innovations that they've presented, I think that there's they've proven themselves. That's not to say we should do this, but it isn't the same thing as other bodies in the community we've been in dialogue with who haven't necessarily proven themselves in the recent past. There's a couple of things that made me flee the East Coast when I thought I might want to move there. I fled back to Urbana in the hopes to come back to the friendly faces in this community. And but the third thing, and I think the thing that that whenever I'm in a bar and I'm asking people, why do you live in Urbana? Why did you stay in Urbana? They say, I can walk everywhere. I can take the bus. I have a car. I use my car to go to St. Louis and Chicago, and sometimes late at night I use my car to get around the community. But generally speaking, I hear over and over and over again the transportation. And I don't just mean the MTD. People oftentimes talk about walking and biking as the number one reasons that they stay in this community. They have all the amenities and they can each other. I don't agree with that. It doesn't have to be that way. I think that if we were able to connect the power of these three cores that we have with a transportation system that came every 10 minutes, that anyone with strollers or wheelchairs or bicycles could get on and off within a moment's notice, maybe on honor system so there aren't people waiting to get on and off with doors that open on the side. I think that we would see this buildup of this core, which is now kind of three disparate destinations, this build up into one core. And I think that we have the opportunity in this community to have our entire community live within a very short drive, if not a walk or a bike, from the core of the community because we have these three cores. I think that we've seen a fight between sprawl and the core for a long time. I'm really pleased to see what downtown Champaign has done to prove that you can pull in on the center and build up the fact that you're sprawling on the edges. And I've heard that this is a thing, that this is an MTD thing, and I object strongly to that. I'm happy that the MTD has wanted to work with us throughout. That's not the case with U of I when they want to plan something. They've moved South Farms, and did they talk to any of our staff about it? They've decided to, redevelop Orchard Downs. They're not communicating with us throughout this entire project, and I commend them for doing that. To see all of our taxing bodies in the U of I do, I think we'd be a stronger community if people had done what the MTD has done throughout. Right now, if you looked at you would think that we're a taxing district for cars. And there's absolutely nothing that says in our mission statement, our bylaws, or whatever, that we are a district for cars. We absolutely, I think, have a responsibility to division. And we don't hear a peep. Every single year, we don't hear a peep from the community about the $3 million, sometimes $4 million in the year that we spend on streets. Not a peep. And yet we're talking about potentially $1 million a year, $500,000 a year. We're not sure, but something on the order of that if we do participate. And it's like the most outlandish thing we've ever stated in the community. It doesn't make sense to me how it is that there's no question about car-oriented development. It is just a given, and there's absolutely no we talk about mass transit, everyone is up in arms. You know, the concept of playgrounds used to be I just want to remind people of that there are, we have these ideas of what we should be spending money on, what we shouldn't. A yes vote for this, I would tell council members, yes, we are in the game. Yes, we do want to work with the MTD, and yes, we are seizing the opportunity that may be before us if we are lucky. Do it until we can't do it. That's what my constituents have said. I received one opposition call. Probably 24 pieces of correspondence on this. I received one opposition call, and she agreed with me by the end of the conversation. So I'm going to be voting yes. Other committee members who have things they would like to contribute at this point? If not, all those in favor of the motion as stated by Ms. Huth signify by saying aye.
Can we have a
roll call committee?
Yes.
Ms. Shuttleworth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Ms. Huth? Yes. Ms. Pat?
No.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Mr. Whalen?
No.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
I'd like to call this meeting back to order after our recess. Committee members, if you could take your seats. Next, we are going to hear a report from Kathy Larson and CD about the farmers market. Kathy, you have the floor.
Get your sausage pizza. And carrot.
Can we get the AV system?
Is that working?
No, no.
AV turned off. Get the overhead. We'll need the overhead projection for this next piece.
Just had it a minute ago. There it is.
There we go.
Gene.
Usually they have to come out with the remote control and turn that on. Looks like we have our PowerPoint coming through.
We just want to take an opportunity to provide you with an overview of how the 2003 Market at the Square season went, and I've just selected a few of the main highlights and pieces of information to share with you tonight. And also, before I get started, I just want to mention that we appreciate seeing each of you out at the market, and definitely in all the previous seasons, especially a couple of you that we see pretty much every Saturday, so thank you for your support. When discussing the market, I've narrowed it down to 4 primary categories to discuss, and those include the participants, the patrons, the operations, and the marketing and promotions. In this presentation, I'll just give you a few details of each of those aspects to summarize how last year's season went. So for the participants category, our principal focus is on the vendors, and we reached an all-time high of 148 vendors. And this doesn't mean that all 148 were there every Saturday. It's just the total number that were registered. And I also included a chart that shows the attendance pattern since 1999, and 67 vendors in 1999, and we've seen a steady increase since that year, which has been great. On average, out of the 148 vendors that we see, an average of 62 participate each week, and since multiple vendors use multiple spaces, they actually use an average of 100. And I've also included a chart on this slide that shows the attendance pattern of vendors each week during 2003. And as you can see, attendance is a little down in the early season and the late season. Definitely a variety of factors can attribute to that, weather related, or if products aren't ready or are ready, definitely can factor that into this lower rates of attendance. We have vendors that rotate in and out weekly in those rows. Row 1 and 2 have more produce vendors and food related vendors. The green is for food and flowers and plants, and the blue, which is more aqua on this slide up here, is for the arts and crafts. I also want to mention that row 4, actually we have never used row 4 until 2002, and we had a few vendors start using that row during that season. We just had 50 to 75% usage of that row on a regular basis, which is really great. Regarding the vendor breakdown by category, for registered vendors, for the total number, 62% were arts and crafts related, and 32% were food and produce. As far as the fees that they pay to participate, and the rates are the same for everyone, but we just have more participation by food and produce and flowers and plants. They participate more consistently, they participate more often, and they utilize more spaces individually. Moving on to other types of participants, we have community groups and musicians that participate at the market, and the total number of registered community groups last year was 53, total number of registered musicians was 22. On average, we saw about 8 community groups and 4 musicians on average per week, and I also have included a chart there that shows the attendance patterns for those groups as well, and definitely there's a lot of fluctuation in those. In this slide, I just want to include a couple pictures. There's a view there on the top of the Urbana Free Library handing out some free items and information to the public at the northwest entrance of the market. And then we have a shot of patrons along the Illinois Street Row shopping. Also in the background, we have a view of the new market archway, which is a great addition to the market. And there's also the newly installed street lights. Definitely all of the streetscape improvements that happened over the past couple years have really enhanced the market. For example, the repaving of the lot and the market archway and the landscape and new sidewalks. It's just really been a great addition. And this slide is just a shot of Illinois Street Row with really early in the morning in the summertime. Important facet of the market. It's the patrons that help to keep the vendors successful at the market. So in 2003, we saw bigger crowds than in previous seasons. We also saw higher numbers of patrons all throughout the season, even early and late portions of the season. And with all these attendees, we also receive a lot of feedback from patrons, and I keep track of feedback that we do get, and we respond accordingly to those pieces of information that we can respond to. And then just a couple more pictures. Here is a couple shots of row 2. It gets pretty packed in there in the summertime. Picture of row 1 here, some patrons, and then row 2 again. And a third element of our market categories I want to talk about includes the operations. And one portion of that includes the tasks of the director. And so I've included an overview of tasks that I take care of every season. We work all year round on the market, so a lot of these items are in the off season, and then a lot of them are either Saturday, weekly functions, or monthly or yearly season. So that's just kind of an overview of those. Another part of operations involves the site logistics out of the market on Saturdays. And, part of that is set up, tear down, parking, the vendor spaces, and coordination. There's just a lot involved. We have a person that helps out. I coordinate with a lot of the vendors and do the setup, tear down. And we also have a staff member that, puts trash barrels out for the patrons to use. They set up barricades, a seating area, just a variety of items that we need out there at the market and provide for us. Another big part of the site logistics includes the vendor spaces and the coordination. Really, in the summer months, it gets congested early morning since we have so many vendors and they have huge setup materials and spaces that they take care of. And especially our older vendors, they do a great job of coordinating with their neighboring vendors to just make sure they're maximizing their space at the best times. Other parts of site logistics include the community groups and making sure they know what spaces they're in, and musician locations as well. And then I added some miscellaneous. Definitely want to make sure both patrons and vendors are aware of their surroundings. And the final topic I wanted to include is a marketing and promotions aspect of the market. I've included a chart here that lists out some of the, well, actually most of the venues that we use for marketing and promotions. And a lot of these are actually free to low-cost means of promoting the market. Definitely, for example, the word of mouth and networking aspect of promotions is priceless, and we just really get a lot of promotion that way by vendors and patrons and staff alike that are just able to keep up the hype about the market. I also wanted to throw in a chart with just a summary of the expenses that we do spend money on, including some of those marketing and promotions. That's how it was allocated during 2003. So looking ahead to 2004, this year, definitely we'll make sure we take another look at the policies, site logistics, and promotions, and plan for those, and maximize our benefits out there at the market. And our first market will be May 15th, and we'll go through November 13th. And that completes my overview of the market.
Any questions for Ms. Larson? Committee members? Questions? Ms. Wyman?
I think it was last summer, this past summer in 2003, that you instituted a program for vendors to sell like ready-made food, and I'm wondering how successful that was, and if you plan on continuing it or expanding it.
Do you mean like the hot food vendors?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually we plan on expanding that, and we wanted to make it as many participants last year as we could. It just involves a lot of clearance through public health, for example, and investment by the vendors themselves. But we received a lot of positive feedback on the ready-made food, hot food being out there. So yeah, we plan to try to increase that if we can.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hayes.
Toward the end of the year, did you take part of the market inside Lincoln Square?
Actually, a lot of positive feedback from some of the food vendors that were in there consistently. Also, a couple of the arts and crafts vendors that were there consistently. I heard good feedback. And I know the vendors are interested in doing that again.
Okay.
Other questions? I have a question. I noticed at this last farmers market you had outdoor seating, and I've often noticed older residents who frequent the market and kind of worried about whether or not they had places to sit and whatnot. Did you notice that people were using the outdoor seating?
You've done on it, and that the rest of the staff does, to make it such a wonderful program.
Thank you.
Other committee members? I agree completely. Thanks. And I know that the Convention and Visitors Bureau is looking at trying to develop with the UBA in the city, our downtown as a destination place for the entire weekend for out-of-town guests to really come and visit our downtown and be a destination point. And the farmers market, that would not be possible without the farmers market. I just think you've done an excellent job.
Thank you.
Other committee members? If not, I don't think that this is just a report about the farmers market. So we'll go on to the next ordinance. Thank you, Kathy. Ordinance number 2004-03024, an ordinance annexing certain territory to the city of Urbana. This refers to approximately 31 total acres on 3 separate tracts located on the south side of Colorado Avenue, approximately 395 feet east of Philo Road.
Right here.
Oh.
I can be very, very brief. This is really just an ordinance that executes an annexation agreement that was passed back on December 1st, 2003, and this is for the property commonly known as the Galladay Tract. Your ordinance sets up approval of this annexation next week. It would be officially annexed into the city on March 16th, and we are expecting development to occur on that tract and consistent with our agreement this year, later this spring and early summer. So you will learn more about this as we have to bring back an agreement for the construction of Colorado Avenue to connect with Stone Creek Boulevard. That was one of the missing pieces of the annexation agreement back in December. So take any questions that you have.
Any question? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That carries. Thank you, Rob. We've already done 8, so we're going to 9. Ordinance number 2004-03027, an ordinance approving and authorizing the execution of an annexation agreement. This refers to the former dog club site, Dennis Onstad and John North. Thank you. Dr. Tyler.
Thanks, and I see Dennis is here waiting patiently. I gave him some coffee, so he's
Sorry for
told me it's
butchering
been
your
very
last name.
interesting, though. So this site is immediately north of the Value Inn on North Cunningham's frontage road, where it turns into Willowview Road, where the Willow Springs condominium development is. It's a corner piece. It's posed a challenge in terms of size, configuration, and access. It was used up until some years additional right-of-way from IDOT, as it sits right in the southeast corner of the interchange of 74 and Cunningham. So has been able to make this into a larger redevelopment site with potential up to 0.72 acres. Annexations desired to help facilitate redevelopment with commercial uses and would also be necessary for any extension of sanitary sewer service to the site, and currently that does not exist. The zoning would translate directly from the county's B4 to the city's B3 district. Some of the provisions contained in the annexation agreement include allowance for replacing a billboard. There's an older billboard located at the site. I think it has Ned Kelly's advertised on it, and that would be under the developer's plan relocated, and it also would be subject to IDOT approval at that location. There's also built into the annexation agreement a variance from the setback requirements along the north and west portions of the site, and since those are adjacent to excess right-of-way along the interstate, those would not affect any adjacent properties or buildings. Annexation agreement also addresses subdividing the site to combine those different parcels from the IDOT right-of-way and the original dog club site. It allows for dedication of 10 feet of right-of-way along the north side of the existing Willowview Road. And this was a kind of an unofficial road, started out as a farm lane. It's never had proper right-of-way dedication, and it's been quite a task to identify what the existing ownership is along the road. So the dedication would be a major step towards getting this roadway validated and improved in the future. There would also be a sidewalk and utility easement along the north side. However, the road standards, at least not at first, so there would be waivers as well from some of our subdivision ordinance requirements for 60 feet of right-of-way. However, as we look at Value Inn redeveloping perhaps in the future, then we would be able to obtain that additional right-of-way to the south. And these are provisions that were reviewed with the city engineer and found to be to his satisfaction. We wanted to tie the provision of sanitary sewers, which would be an investment of about $15,000, to a minimum level of the creation of a Class A liquor license in the event that the site is redeveloped with a restaurant or tavern. As far as potential future uses, those have not yet been defined, but could include mobile home sales office, a restaurant or tavern, office, warehouse building, any number of commercial uses. We've set a public hearing for next week at 7:20 p.m. and have notified
nearby neighbors as well as the districts that will be affected by the annexation. I have included a number of our comprehensive plan goals that talk about annexing adjacent properties and promoting commercial redevelopment close to the city limits. Fiscal impacts would be related to adding to the commercial tax base for the city, potential for increased retail sales, and at the same time the need to extend those sanitary sewer services, which are budgeted routinely. So we've attached the draft agreement. We've spent some time working with Mr. Onstadt and the provisions for the agreement, and would be happy to answer any questions about it.
Move approval.
Second?
Motion is second. Are there discussions or questions for staff? If not, all those in favor saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That carries. And next we have a discussion of the downtown action plan, and I'm going to ask that Mr. Otto take the position of chair for this next item because Ms. Tubby will be presenting.
I'll be happy to do that.
We'll just give a brief introduction, and I'll just summarize my summary, which I presented to you in memo form on the campaign to build downtown Urbana. Most of you probably had the opportunity to attend the presentation on the campaign from members Chenoweth and Huth, and they recognize the national trend to revitalize downtowns and their economies, and they propose to build upon the unique characteristics of downtown Urbana and address some of the deficits thereof to renovate the economy in downtown Urbana. And they propose to do this through a public-private partnership of businesses and nonprofit organizations and government. And their campaign can best be summarized by the 6 in your memo: investing in the downtown, facilitating startup businesses and growth in the downtown businesses, promoting visible outdoor activities, improving access to the downtown area, and bringing visibility to the current developments that are occurring as future developments, and also implementing the downtown strategic plan. The campaign to build downtown Urbana is compatible with community goals that are set forth in the downtown strategic plan, and their objectives are consistent with efforts. So the economic impact from downtown with its implementation of the Build Urbana downtown program as well as the downtown strategic plan will not only town area but increase the capacity for business development and in the area, as well as conducting the promotional activities that will help make downtown Urbana a centerpiece in the community again. Therefore, staff recommends adoption of the campaign to build downtown Urbana's annual action plan.
Ms. Huth and Ms. Chenoweth.
Yeah, we have a little bit of a presentation for you that involves a PowerPoint presentation. It's not responding.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. We're going to hit type before they start make a motion to extend time.
Yep, certainly. All right, we have a motion, a second. Is there any discussion? If there's no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it, so we're extended until, I guess, 11:30.
I wonder if I can.
Well, they're working on that, just on a couple of agenda items. Since we are running late into the evening, is there any objection if we go ahead and defer items 11 and 12 until the next?
No objections here.
Okay, no objections there. Ms. Huth, or Ms. Wyman, do you guys object to deferring item until the next committee meeting?
Nope. Not at all.
None? Mr. Hayes? All right. Then that's all right. If there's no objection, then
I think the computer's got tired.
we're going to defer items 11 and 12 until the next committee meeting.
And we're waiting on the...
Right.
Yeah, that's fine. I can use a pad. You who are watching this from home at 11 o'clock at night, we now have working technology. Laura and I, very briefly on the campaign to build downtown Urbana. We had extremely successful unveiling of this campaign, and from partnering organizations in support of this campaign. The campaign itself is a public-private partnership to build downtown, and the UBA will had an opportunity to walk through this on multiple occasions. This is really a consensus document that we have worked with the mayor, council members, staff, the business community, the development community, potential investors, and members of the UBA and existing businesses in downtown to develop. And so it's taken a while to put it together, but it helps us all kind of get on the same page in terms of what we want to see in our downtown. I'm just going to walk through this. I have an 8-slide presentation here. We have the 6 major goals, which John Regis has gone over for the campaign, and these really get at the heart of what we heard businesses and investors needed to build, to have the confidence to come into our downtown and make something happen. I want to pull out a few pieces of that campaign. One is to promote investment. We are actively pursuing an extension of TIF 2 until 2021, and have letters of support from the Park District and School District to do that. That was not the case when we started this campaign last summer, started working towards a document like this. And we think that will be a kitty from which to work on our project. We're looking at building multiple mixed-use developments on city-owned lots using an RFP process. Race, Broadway, and Illinois all offer opportunities for this. We are asking staff to look at our grant and loan programs and see if we need to increase them, what we need to better promote them, and to encourage staff and the mayor to develop new incentives for targeted improvements. We have 2 pictures here of successful projects that the city has invested in the recent future, the Iron Post on the right, and Tang Dynasty, which is a new Asian restaurant going into Lincoln Square. Those windows were not there before. They were knocked out of the wall, and they used the grant and loan program of the cities to do that, and they are opening, I believe, in the middle of this month, so maybe in the next week or so we'll be able to eat in Lincoln Square Asian food. Next, we have Make It Easy to Grow a Business. We would like to offer service guarantees for downtown businesses. It's something that we saw with the Build Urbana program, that people needed to know that they had a quick turnaround time. And one of the things that impacts businesses the most is time. It's not always money. They may have the money to invest, but they take out that loan and they start paying interest on it the day they take out the loan. And if there are any problems with moving forward, that only adds to their to the overall cost of a project. We have talked about constituting a downtown task force as a one-stop shop for city services that meets with developers and businesses. This is something that businesses we spoke to were looked on very favorably. The city currently does quite a bit of on-location, and we do work close campaign. That would mean promoting outdoor visible activity, and we do believe that there are some things that make it difficult to do that right now. We have lots of ways in which people can have sidewalk sales, cafe seating, sandwich boards, etc. But we've heard from businesses that it's a difficult system to navigate, and so we would like to create a one-way to create a one right-of-way uses license that would allow for these kinds of uses. So it would be very easy. It would be a piece that we could market to businesses to encourage them to take their activities outside. We have a goal with the UBA and the CVB to make downtowns in Urbana the destination for families and to promote and grow the arts and culture. These are strengths of our downtown currently. And with the UBA, actually, we're talking to them about this concept, and I think within weeks of our conversations, they decided to go ahead and extend the farmers market indoors and take on the administrative role of that. So we started talking about this, and some of the things that we talked about doing as we launched this campaign have actually already been done because of the enthusiasm of the partner organizations. The farmers market on the left is a spinner and weaver who sells at the farmers market indoors and did so this last fall. And then on the outside we have a number of people coming out of the arch. Take It Outside, a street music and theater day and night. One of our goals is to see a lot more activity both day and night in terms of theater, music, and the arts. On the left-hand side, we have story time hosted by Urbana. Instead of maybe, we want to make it easy. We want to encourage this kind of activity. Family Fun Day Sunday was something that came out of our conversations with the UBA, and they went ahead and started it. Before we were even able to unveil the campaign, they were on top of it, and every Sunday from 1 to 5, at least through these colder months in Lincoln Square, you can bring your family into your children or children you care about or guardians for into Lincoln Square, and for, I think it's either $3 or $4, they can ride all the rides for that full 4 hours. People can walk to children's programming at our library, including Family Fun Fair with stories and songs. This just goes to emphasize our current strength. And here's a list of things that you can already do with families. We really already have a number of things that people can do, and we want to grow these kinds of activities. One other task under the goal of having more visible outdoor activity is to work on establishing a public arts trust fund and creating a public arts commission. And 40 North 88 West has constituted a committee of the board to pursue a regional public arts program, and I hope to bring something to council in the next year that would look at establishing a arts project here in Urbana. Another goal was to improve the ability to find, travel to, and park in downtown, and that is generally making bicyclists and pedestrians more accommodated in downtown. And then we have a lot going on in downtown, and I think because it happens, you know, a week here or a month there, different things are happening. I think it's important for us to put together all of the things that are going on in our downtown. We really are seeing the beginning of a renaissance in our downtown. We have redevelopment at University in Cunningham. Helmix on Ray Street is being redeveloped. Looks like a future use very well may be a banquet center and some retail space. We Stratford project on Ray Street and other RFP projects we'd be doing in the future. Tang Dynasty. The office has done a facade renovation. I know that the IMC is also undergoing a facade renovation currently. We have a number of tech businesses kind of tucked into our downtown, not as visible. We have a Thai restaurant opening any day now in the old Sandwich Boy area. Carter Furniture had significant expansion. Piccadilly also had some renovations with their outdoor space. And then the library, the court. And the last goal is to implement the downtown strategic plan and to continue on our journey to realize the visions that we have put forth in that plan. So, Ms. Huth, do you have any additions to that? If not, we'll take questions from council members.
Any questions or comments for Ms. Chenoweth and Ms. Huth?
If not, I guess a motion would, we would like to see a motion in support of, to send the annual action plan to council next week.
Okay. Ms. Pat?
I move to send the downtown, I'm sorry, what's it called exactly?
Campaign
the downtown action plan to city council next week with a recommendation for approval by the council.
Second.
Further discussion. Mr. Hayes?
Ones around the bar, around the back. But the other is, didn't get in. So the receptionist said, that's tough. I just, everything was fine up to that point. That's a long time.
Okay. Ms. Wyman?
I just want to add, it was a great presentation. It was Jim and I got to sit next to Jim, and it was really enlightening. And it generated, I think, a lot of enthusiasm to see public officials, to see business leaders, to see staff there, and everyone really anxious and interested and excited about continuing to build on what we've got in downtown and making sure all the core components are there work and bringing that all together.
Thanks for meeting with us over the last 6 to 8 months and giving your input.
Ms. Patton.
Thank you. I'm sorry I missed the event, hors d'oeuvres or not, and all the hype. But the presentation tonight here was very good, and you might be surprised, given the time, how many people might have actually seen it, because it's sort of an in-between, working very hard on this for many months, and it's necessary and exciting. I appreciate your taking it on, and look forward to good things happening in Urbana. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All in favor?
If there's no further business,
We have to vote still.
oh, we haven't voted yet. Okay. All in favor, motion carries. All right. If there's no further business, we did that by unanimous consent. Yeah.
All in favor, say aye, aye, aye. All in favor,
We
say
stand
aye,
adjourned.
aye, aye. All in favor, say aye.